What's the most surprising trade secret about your job? I managed boarding and grooming kennels for 8 years. The secret is that the employees actually do love your pets too, even the difficult ones. Most of us realize they just miss their people. The number of times I've wept when a pet died, or spent way too many hours comforting a dog with separation anxiety, or spent hours off the clock with a boarder who needed to be rushed to a vet office, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Some pets do just suck though, not gonna lie. I'm a server. No matter how much we insist it's okay that you're keeping the entire restaurant open after we've closed, please know that we are 100% lying. We will get fired if we deviate from anything other than pure delight that you're keeping us from going home. We dread it. Please don't believe us. I used to work in jewelry. Most of the prettiest gemstones are also very affordable. Tanzanite is a beautiful purple and looks nicer than amethyst. Topaz comes in lots of colors, including a pretty blue color which can be as nice as aquamarine. Opals aren't as brightly rainbow-hued as they look in pictures. Almost every hairstylist gets the heebie-jeebies when we shampoo your hair and you just stare up at us. Close your damn eyes at the shampoo bowl. I used to screen resumes for small companies. Job requirements are more of a wish list situation. Never let some unchecked boxes deter you from applying. You have no idea what the applicant pool is like. The biggest boon, especially at small companies, is someone who legitimately cares. My company once put out a job vacancy for a position that would assist me in my job. Looking purely at the job requirements, I didn't feel like I was qualified to assist myself in a job I've been doing for 2 years. If you're looking for work and a job seems even remotely like you could do it, apply anyway. It's not like you have anything to lose. There is way more butter than you think in almost every dish you eat at fancy restaurants, and that's usually the reason you won't see the amount of calories in each dish. My source? 5 years as head chef in Italian cuisine, 8 years in an Italian kitchen. I'm an attorney. The secret is shut the F up. As the narrator of many videos where the clients in question immediately stuck their foot in their mouths and incriminated themselves, I'd say that this commenter is probably right on the money. I worked for the biggest mast contractor in Virginia for 8 years. They're the company that owns Bath & Body Works, and they're a division of L Brand. There are so many fragrances that are rebranded and recolored to a different flavor. Fragrance oil is absolutely 100% the most expensive part of any shower gel or foaming soaps that we made. Odds are they have hundreds of thousands of pounds of these oils in warehouses all over the US, so they just rebrand it as something else. It's not like they're going to scrap it. Also, all of this crap you see on the labels of shower gels and foaming soaps that say enriched with vitamin E or contains aloe vera extract is absolute complete frickin' bullcrap. We made our batches in sizes 40,000 pounds. In a 40,000 batch, you had about 2 ounces of vitamin E you'd add to the batch, and barely enough aloe extracts to get it out of the frickin' cup to add it to the batch. They add the bare minimum to have it on the label, as required by the FDA. Foaming soaps are also about 65% water, so they make an absolute killing selling those. Let me tell you that some therapists and counselors are on the wrong side of the couch, so to speak. If you feel your mental health provider is unhinged, they may very well be. A family member tried to break up with his long-term girlfriend, who was a therapist. I was shocked at her absolutely unhinged behavior, which included, but was not limited to, her taking his childhood teddy bear, chopping it up with garden shears, and piling it up on his bed with the note, "This is what you're doing to my heart," stabbed into it with a steak knife. I work with central heating. Change your dirty furnace filters and clean your AC coils outside. These make up an easy 30% of my calls for no heat or cooling. At Goodwill, 50% of what you donate ends up in the trash because we don't have the space for it or we just deem it too ugly to sell. I work in Elkhart, Indiana, which is the RV capital of the world. All I'm saying is there's a reason no one who works in the RV industry owns an RV. The quality is rubbish on all the major companies, the big ones being Thor, Forest River, and Grand Design. These 3 companies own probably 90% of all RV companies, so check with who owns what you're buying. There are some mom-and-pop shops that do put out good products, but these are pretty few and far between. As a software engineer, you double your delivery date for a product in anticipation of an over-eager project manager trying to get promoted. I always pad the due date and then get it done ahead of the deadline, and my clients love me. Former aircraft fueler. Don't check your pets into your flights, especially in summer or winter. They're submitted to some very harsh environments, left on belt loaders in the sweltering heat right next to a running APU that's loud enough to deafen human ears, let alone a dog's. It's terrible. I always feel so sorry for those pooches. American Airlines will destroy your luggage, they get overloaded on carts, fall off on the way to the plane, and they're left there to get run over by tankers and, yes, fuelers and rained on, then dragged to the edge of the ramp to sit all night while you arrive at your destination and wonder where the hell your bags are. If your departure is delayed, 90% of the time it's us, the fuelers. Look out the window to the right side if it's a small plane, left side if it's a really big plane. If there's a truck sitting under the wing, we're the reason you're late. Sorry. The industry-leading software is at least 10 years old at its core. We had an engineer essentially beg, borrow, and steal his own work hours to rewrite an entire facet of our software to be independent of the 8-year-old core we'd outgrown 5 years ago. And as soon as he had done that and written a nice utility for testing that was now possible, meaning we didn't have to spin up so many services in local environments, we got a ton of work in that area of the software. Like, I'm still working on it and he's already moved on to another company. The debt he erased and the tool he created, it's like we're 60% better and faster at everything. Plus the morale factor. We would have drowned without that work. We miss you, MT. The best therapists go to therapy. The cheapest bottle of wine in the restaurant has the biggest markup. You'd be surprised at how willingly someone will do their job and even go above and beyond if you just compliment them for their professionalism, politeness, and how they're helping them. Worked at a department store photography studio owned by a major photography company that you can imagine probably took your school yearbook photos. The company was also partnered with a popular online photo order website. You ever notice how quickly we write down a price, strike it out and write a new price as the deal? Yeah, that's pretty much just the price that everyone gets. We aren't doing math that fast, we have it memorized because almost everyone that comes in has that 40% off coupon. Don't come in without a coupon because there's always a coupon on the website. If you end up paying for sitting fees, it's because you just didn't go to our website. Honestly, don't buy our photos. If you just do the session and then say that you'll buy them online later, on said partnered photo order site, it will be cheaper than if you buy them in store that day. Yes, even when we say, oh, but you won't get this deal online. If you do buy in studio that day, just buy the digital CD of your photos. You get to keep all of them instead of having to pick your favorite 3 or 4 pictures. Oh, and again, it's way cheaper to take that CD to a photo kiosk and have them printed yourself. Please don't spend $400 on a couple of photos that you can't legally copy when you could just get an $80 CD of all the photos and have the copyright to them. The narrator assumed that this comment would be like 15 years old or something, but it looks like it was posted as late as 2020. But the more I think about it, even with the advent of amazing camera phones and filters, family photos probably still need a professional in studio from time to time. Wild how much money you can save though. Thanks for the tip. Not an industry I work in per se, but I used to be in a sales role. One of my customers was a milk bottling plant. I was somewhat surprised that they were putting the exact same milk in both organic and non-organic cartons. Turns out, all of their milk is organic, but in order to not miss out on the sales of non-organic milk, they just bottle them differently and sell them at different prices. Construction boy here. If your windows or sliding doors are tough to open and close, 9 times out of 10, we put your own dish soap on tracks and the thing works perfectly. It takes 5 minutes and we charge $150. Dish soap, people. It's better than WD-40 sometimes. Amusement park ride operator here. If your kid is crying and you want us to stop the ride, even if we want to, it's not gonna stop immediately. The carousel will spin a few more circles or the ship will swing a few more times before stopping. The only exception is the emergency stop, which will absolutely mess up the ride, potentially causing mechanical damage if we press it. Hence, we only use it in actual life-threatening situations. The best thing you can do is try to get your kid to calm down as the ride comes to a stop. And no, yelling, "Stop the ride" at us doesn't make it stop faster. Nobody uses bots to inflate metrics more than the most major players in the entertainment industry. All the numbers are fake, including sales. Everything at the Container Store exists and is cheaper at Lowe's. Companies lie to their customers about saving their credit card information because they aren't supposed to. They'll also save their social, addresses, and 5 of their most recent phone numbers and bank account numbers. I know this from my life as a student loan servicer. If in doubt, lubricate. I'm a machinist. I'm a teacher. If you, as a parent, will read with your child often and early, your child will thrive in school. I'm talking daily books read together from newborn to about 3rd grade. Every single day, no teacher can really replace that. Of course, there are always exceptions, such as dyslexia and learning disabilities. So here's another industry secret. Your child won't always fit the school model. Teachers know that, and that's okay. We're all just people, after all. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. RV technician here. Stuff is designed to start breaking after about 44 uses. Most RV owners use their trailers on weekends, but not every weekend, so that 44 uses on average stretches between 2 and 3 years. Every client seems to think architects are unnecessary and that they can just draw up the plans themselves, but they're just too busy. At Goodwill, we don't clean anything that we sell, and we get some really gross stuff that touches everything else, so next time you buy something from Goodwill, wash it well. The weight loss industry. This might be obvious, but most of our business comes from return clients after they've gained their weight back and then some. To be clear, the plan isn't rigged to make you gain it back, but the fact that it happens easily as a result of dieting does keep us in business. Audio engineer here, a few seemingly obvious things to point out. 9 times out of 10 with a studio, you get what you pay for. You have to pay for years of experience, acclaimed expertise, plus hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment and software tools, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars that went into the acoustic engineering of the physical recording space alone. People walk into great studios, bulk at recording $1,000 plus for a song, but don't realize they're getting access to close to $1 million in tools, plus an engineer who's going to make them sound better than real life. On the flip side of that coin, be wary of eye candy. Don't be fooled by big mixing consoles. Sometimes they're not even used for your music. Heck, sometimes they don't even function. I've seen studios where the sole purpose of a large board is to dupe unsuspecting musicians into parting with their money. In larger studios, bands with smaller budgets are often stuck with an intern who may not even be getting paid. If your music is crap, no amount of production is going to make it a hit. As a small studio owner, I only share work that I think will bring me more business. Wondering why I haven't shared your music? It's because it's garbage. Billie Eilish recorded on budget equipment at home with her brother. Those recordings were then worked on by some of the best engineers in the world to make it sound like it wasn't. Be wary of a record label. They might offer to front the costs of your recordings and touring, but you have no creative control over your sound, where you record, your tour schedule, and usually the label will own your music. Oh, and you have to pay all of that money back to the label afterwards. Be cautious of studios that claim so-and-so recorded here. There's a studio in Iowa that claims Slipknot recorded here, and while it's true that Slipknot did record in that building, it was a different owner, different engineers, and some different equipment. You're not going to sound like Slipknot by recording there. Sorry. A lot of successful artists at a certain level of success do nothing more than create a concept and employ several assistants who are either current or graduating art students who actually make the art itself, its reproductions, or both. I know this is old news in the art industry and academy, but outside of it, I found it very hard to explain my job to people. I do believe that films also romanticize this field and warp what a lot of outsiders think it actually is. Well, I think this should be pretty obvious, but for big brand hotels, if you try to sneak above the hotel and call the corporate customer care line to demand compensation or complain, that customer care line will always call the hotel for the full story and not just blindly give compensation. As a former TSA worker, airport security is a lot of theater. TSA is constantly failing plainclothes inspections. I worked with a guy who got fired because someone showed him an ID with a picture of Mickey Mouse on it, and he let the person through because he wasn't paying attention. I work in aviation as well. TSA is tested by something called red teams. They basically try to get things past security. The red team's success rate is in the 90% range. Okay, so the narrator knew that the TSA was famously ineffective and more meant as a deterrent, but 90% fail rate? Come on! Why am I being pulled over literally every trip I go on for nothing if they're letting Mickey Mouse onto the goddamn plane? In Microsoft Office, Word specifically, you can upload recorded interviews and it will transcribe it, and even have speaker 1 and speaker 2, 3, and 4, basically eliminating a huge annoying part of the job. Okay, I'm adding this in post. You do need to be subscribed to Office, and then when in Word, there's a dictate button. If you click it, dictate and transcribe should pop up. Click transcribe. Yes, it's not perfect, but for a reporter who's transcribing all day long, it's definitely the most annoying thing ever that I dread doing on a daily basis. Learning this skill changed my life. Healthcare. Homemaker. If your grandparent or parent gets in-home care, please know that your family member could live in a cockroach-infested house and not have to move if they didn't want to. It's not up to the company to give your loved ones environmentally safe places to live, it's up to the family. They can certainly try to persuade, but they can't force. Why do I know this? Because I've been to the cockroach-infested house where an 80-year-old woman lives. I have a mentally ill client that put bleach in his dog's water to help with its breathing. I have a client who never cleans his cat box. I have a client who has a caved-in ceiling. I've called it in, but there's no help from the company. All they say is, there's nothing we can do, it's up to the family members. It's a sad, sad thing because there are so many family members and friends who really don't give a crap how some of their relatives are living. Sure, they'll visit, but do they clean the litter box? Do they make sure there are no cockroaches? Do they make sure the house is stable and not falling apart? Nope. They say they care and that they love the person, but they don't care enough to make sure they live in a healthy environment. It really worries me because if I imagine my own mother having such a deteriorated mind and there were no other family members to help her, she could live in a run-down, cockroach-infested house if she was stubborn enough. It frustrates me because whereas the client does have rights, should they really have the right to live somewhere where their health could be at risk, where their caregivers could be at risk as well? I understand that there are different perspectives. I'm well aware that many elderly or mentally ill people are severely stubborn and won't let you help. I know because I care for these types of people and hear about them often. I'm not disregarding your struggles. I simply wrote this post when I was overwhelmed and stressed from work. I've met many families who care for them, and bless you all who do. We need more of you in the world. Federal HR here. If you put the words from the vacancy announcement about what you need to qualify in your resume, you'll almost always be qualified. We search for those words instead of reading an entire resume. I'm a musician. It's not really a secret, but 90% of our revenue is from merch. Spotify plays, show guarantees and things, everything is menial in comparison to shirt sales. In fact, a big reason bands tour as often as possible is because we can sell more shirts when we're in front of people. The kind donations people give, hoping they go directly to the clients and shelters, actually end up at the Salvation Army or Goodwill to be resold, even though we're instructed to tell them that that won't be the case, and this is done before the clients are given the chance to decide if they want some of the donated stuff. As a beginner counselor straight out of school, I worked with a lot of children and adolescents. Consistently, the discussion with my colleagues was how it was the parents who were the biggest problem and the kids were just adapting to a crazy environment. Library worker here. The majority of donations we receive do not end up in circulation, on our shelves. No matter how much you demand we put them there once they're donated. The reason why this is because we only add items to the collection that we think will be checked out. Most libraries get funding based off statistics. We don't want to waste shelf space on items that people aren't checking out, as it won't improve our stats. So, unless the donated items are brand new or by popular authors, we won't be adding them to the collection. We also weed out unpopular items from our collection with extreme prejudice for this very reason, much to our patrons' horror. These books usually end up being sold at book sales to help generate funding for other library programs. Also, a lot of librarians will waive your fines if you have an excuse and you don't ask too frequently, even large fines. Librarians don't care about your fines and they aren't judging you. Please come back. We'd personally have more fines than you. Librarians are always overdue with their books. I'm a fossil replicator, and apparently the industry secret is just the fact that we exist. So many people are blown away to learn that most fossils they see in museums are replicas. Plumber here. There's no such thing as a flushable wipe. The package is lying. Your drains will clog and fast. Your landlord will charge you and it's gonna suck. Just throw wipes in the trash if you use them. Toilet paper is the only acceptable wipe to throw away. Not a secret at all, just common knowledge somehow. Firefighters are trained in several areas and can specialize deeper into certain disciplines. Most of the emergencies we get called to are situations that we've never been trained in, but with 4 of us on a fire truck, we can normally figure out a solution. I'm a dentist. Here's the lowdown on toothpaste. As long as it has fluoride, they're all basically the same. Once when I was in dental school, the Colgate lady came by and said that everything that says Colgate Total on it is exactly the same. The only difference is the packaging. So whether it says whitening or gum protection or whatever else it is, it's all exactly the same. The exception is sensitivity toothpaste, typically. It does have an extra active ingredient, KNO3, which helps with sensitivity. Don't ever feel obligated to buy the expensive toothpaste because you think it will be better for your teeth. Just buy whatever you like best. Auto insurance agent. Please, for the love of God, don't tell auto insurance agents more than you have to. They ask you a question, you just say yes or no, and answer the question as straight as you can. If you go on and on about your life story, you'll probably end up saying something you don't have to and making your rate higher or getting yourself declined. We want to get you that policy as cheap as possible, just only tell us what we need to know and don't say anything else. Those fruits and veggies you buy at the grocery store? Wash them. Teachers. What's something a student of yours has said that made you lose hope for them? Principal at an inner-city high school. I had to sit down with a student who had been caught plagiarizing for a second time. This time, from The Onion. I had a student use The Onion as a source. Specifically this one. Barry Bonds took performance-enhancing substances, reports everyone who has ever watched baseball. Hey now, the inability to tell satire from news is a really popular style of idiocy these days. There was this kid named Lawrence who was one of those typical wallflower Catholic kids I grew up with. His dad was in our scout troop as a leader and was really meticulous. Like everything had to be just so. In the late 70s, most of the troop leaders had a relaxed dress code, but Lawrence's dad dressed like a 1940s scouting manual model, complete with brown uniform and wide-brimmed hat. Everything was pleated and pressed. His dad drove an old MG Roadster that was constantly breaking down. They were upper class and his mum was not in the picture. But the way Lawrence's dad picked on him was brutal. Stand up straight, Lawrence. Chin up. Be a good lad. Chest out. Chin up. Lawrence, don't go over there. It's dirty over there. Lawrence, stand straight and tall when I address you. Don't be rude. Wait until I've started eating before you start. Lawrence, do I have to raise my voice, Lawrence? By high school, Lawrence just gave up. He wasn't perfect enough, so why bother? He stared into space, he attended school in person only, just a blank and hollow shell. His clothing didn't change, it only became dirtier. His hair got long, he lost weight, and his clothes just hung on him. I think the only way to deal with his dad's control issues was passive resistance. By his senior year in high school, he flunked out. Not sure what happened to him after that. High school teacher here. Dude, if you don't start coming to class and doing the work, you'll fail out of school. School's done nothing for me. I'm gonna rap to pay the bills, bro. Kid was an awful musician. Couldn't make a beat, couldn't write a rhyme to save his life. I've now had 3 successful rappers graduate from my class. Years later, 2 of them have given up on the whole thing as more than a hobby, and 1 is still touring Europe. So when I have some kid rap terribly at me and say that's how he's going to make his money as an excuse for not doing anything in my class, I just laugh and then advise them to work on their flow. I work at an arts high school that attracts a lot of talented kids. You can still tell who's going to actually have a career in the arts because only a small number have the correct combination of dedication and talent, and an even smaller subset have humility and the ability to work with others. Yep, I have a friend I consistently second-guessed when he went on about the fact he was gonna make it one day. Didn't believe him, but he made it. Then again, he was always supremely talented, and I guess he finally figured out how to work hard in the end. Kid. Totally serious. I'm gonna drop out. I'll make money off YouTube. How many views are your videos getting? Kid. I have 4 subscribers, so I just need a few more. I had a student who has a severe mental disability, but was quite gifted in maths. But he's told myself, other adults in the room, the special education department head, and school psychologist he is going to drop out of high school to be a YouTuber. Mum and Dad are in serious denial of this fact, but he's dead set on it. You can see it in his eyes. In other news, it seems that the generation of students I have now want to be either YouTubers or professional video games players. I was born in the late 80s, and when I was their age, I remember having classmates being sternly told the actual statistics of them becoming professional athletes. I still have 2 to 3 classmates, graduated high school in 2007, that are dead set on making it into the NFL, but never played in high school or college. I feel this is the same with kids I'm seeing now. They don't truly understand the extremely low chance of them becoming pro in social media. Because they're growing up watching these people, of course they want to be like them. Just like the kids of our generation wanted to be movie stars or professional athletes. It's just that the world is moving into a digital age. Incident number 1. Can we just not learn this? It's hard. We should skip it. Incident number 2. I don't have to get good grades. My grandfather owns a house, and when he dies, my family is going to sell it for $1 million, so I won't ever have to get a job. I have a distant aunt like that. Screwed my mother and all her siblings and close family over, manipulating her father to change the will on his deathbed. She wanted all the money so she'd never have to work again. She spent it all inside 6 months and is now completely broke. She destroyed any shred of love any of my family had for her. Really, truly a horrible person. My wife told me this story about the time she was lecturing a kid on why he should try to do well in school. She asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up. His response, "I want to be in jail. That's where my dad and uncle is." She had no response, probably the only time in her career that she was left speechless by a student. Frick, that's actually really sad. How about, if you study you could get a job as a guard in their jail and make life nice for your dad and uncle as well as seeing them every day. I had a student who was always acting up. I constantly tried talking to him about his behavior, and I wrote plenty of referrals. Throughout all of this, I would email and call his mother, but never got a response. One day, he was pacing around and texting someone. I told him to put his phone away, and he said, "I can't, I'm not too happy right now." So I said, "Will you take it out into the hall and I'll give you 1 minute?" His response really shook me. He said, "No, I'll sit down. I just want my mom to turn the water back on." When all you know about a student is what you see in the classroom, it's easy to forget that they may not have a great home life. So I did wonder, is there any hope for him? But it also wasn't truly any fault of his own. He just had a crap home life where he was stricken by poverty. This is how my niece is. It's terrible. She's 15 and should be worrying about school and college. Instead, she worries about getting the younger kids up, getting them dressed and fed. On Monday, she kept asking me if I could drop off some bread and milk and cereal. It's just so frustrating because there are 3 adults in that house and none of them work. They're just junkies. We have called Child Protection Services more times than we can count. Her mother had her at 15 and then just kept having kids. My sister-in-law also grew up in a similar home to the one she's providing now. I really just think it's one of those cycles that she just can't break. Her thought process is, I grew up like this, so why make it any different from my kids? All 4 of them have different dads and only one of them has a dad that's involved. I want to be a substance dealer, but the cool kind. You know, the ones that wear a suit and carry a briefcase. He was 17 at the time and completely serious. He was expelled a month later for jumping another student. When is the teacher coming? This wasn't the first lesson I had with this child. I teach computer science in university. I get a lot of freshmen that picked the major because they heard it was a high-paying major, but don't actually like the subject they're in. The worst was a recent student that asked if they could just do the assignments by hand. They don't want to use a computer, they didn't really like using them. People use computers too much. I don't start doing that. Also thought computers could do too much and wanted people to stop using them. Bruh, this is a programming course for computers, in a major about making computers do things. You're going to need to use a computer. Needless to say, I told them this probably wasn't the major for them. Is it just me, or does it sound like everyone's elderly parents complaining at the pace the world is moving in? A true old soul already, and this comment was from 2016, when we'd all been solidly using laptops at uni for a decade. I used to teach science in public high school, had to convince a sophomore that trees came from seeds, and I blew his mind. I had one 4-year-old who couldn't hold a pencil. He couldn't remember how to pick it up and didn't have the strength to push it down hard enough on the paper to get any leverage. He couldn't color, had no motor skills whatsoever. He didn't have a dominant hand. His parents liked to leave him at my learning center for an hour, even though he couldn't use the bathroom on his own. He was 4 years old and didn't have the slightest grasp of the alphabet and couldn't retain anything we taught him. It took a month to get him to count to 10. My theory on all of this is that on top of a learning disability or developmental delay, his mum was in denial, and of course he was a natural lefty, who was forced to use his right hand, but because of his disability, he couldn't, and ended up not developing any motor skills in either hand. Poor kid. Had a fourth grader say he didn't need school because he was going to have a wife and she would do everything. Same student, while disrupting the entire class, also said, "What are you gonna do? I know you can't hit me." At the time, the kid was visiting the school social worker multiple times a week. Dad wouldn't hold a job while mum did everything and learned from dad to disrespect rules and that getting into trouble meant nothing. Kid was expelled shortly after that for beating and holding another student against the wall and threatening to kill him. We wish we could have done something for the kid, but it was a small private school with limited resources and the parents didn't help with reinforcement. We were happy when the parents pulled the two older kids out as well, since they were starting to cause a lot of problems as well. I taught lower elementary. Most teachers will get frustrated at some point by how hard it can be to get a child who may be lacking upstairs some extra help. This was the case with one of my favorite students. It didn't matter that he couldn't do any of the work that his peers were doing due to his incredibly low IQ. He was performing at his ability level, but he was just so nice to everyone. I had set time aside every day to help him with his reading. We were using the short story of The Ugly Duckling. It had one short sentence on each page, and after 2 weeks, he could get through it with minimal help. However, reading the words isn't all there is to reading. I had asked him if he could tell me what the story was about, since we had spent time on it every day for the last 2 weeks. He started his oral retelling off great, and I'm super excited. This is a huge deal for my man because up until this point, I couldn't get any retell or comprehension out of him. I'm super pumped and he is feeding off my energy, and he's so proud of himself. This kid is glowing. We're only 3/4 of the way through the story though, and we come up to the end of The Ugly Duckling, and he's telling me that the duckling changes. This word took us forever to say, much less read, but then he stops and goes into his deep thinking stage. I prod him a little bit. He changes? What does he change into there, buddy? He brings his eyes back from the ceiling, and then with the biggest smile, he shouts out, "A butterfly!" A girl, 8th grade, told me she wanted to have kids, 2 to 3, by the time she was 18, so she could have the energy to keep up with them and then work the pole to support them. My wife had a student in 3rd grade who refused to do any writing assignments. My wife told him that she was going to call his parents to explain what was going on if he didn't start doing his work. He said, "I don't care. My mom said I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Rules don't apply to me." My wife called his mum, and his mum told my wife that she, meaning my wife, just has to understand how her son is, and if he doesn't want to do the work, then he doesn't have to. His behaviors all made sense after that, and it was a very tough year. He stopped doing all work and started harassing other kids, probably partially due to boredom, since he was doing nothing else by the end of the year. As long as he was happy, my wife couldn't get the mum on board. "I ain't doing any of that crap. My mum already said she's signing the papers, to drop out, as soon as I turn 16. Look, I know that many people often drop out and end up going back to get a GED. I sincerely hope this young man turns his life around. He'd had an incredibly tough upbringing, and along with that, a history of violent conduct in and out of school. I tried my best to remain patient with him in my room and to motivate him any way I could. At the point he said those words, I just don't think there was anything more I could do. That was last year, and he hasn't been back to school this year. I really hope that at some point he figures things out and gets his life going in a positive direction, whatever that might be. University professor here. A student last term never purchased the textbook and thus never did his homework. He sat in the back and spaced out all class, failed one exam, and barely passed the other. He came to me during the final week of class to ask me if he could do all of his missed assignments and then ask why I didn't remind him to do them. Bro, this is university. I am not chasing after you. I had one who stopped coming to class for the last 6 weeks of the semester, and instead of writing the essay on the exam, wrote a 2-page rant about how unfair it was of me to base the exam on stuff that happened in class. Also in the rant, complains about how I had not called her to remind her to do assignments, come to class, or find out what was on the exam. A good reminder that many students aren't too far removed from school kids. No judgment, I was a moron in my first year of uni. Also, these two both seem in the making to become prime Karens. I work at an alternative school for kids kicked out of public school for severe emotional and behavioral issues. A lot of them are going to require government services for the rest of their lives. There's usually not just one thing they say, but we know that they will never have normal lives. It's a little disheartening to hear a 6-year-old scream that he's going to fricking kill you, especially when you were playing tag not 5 minutes before. There's a young boy who can be very sweet and is an adorable blonde butterball. However, he has pretty severe behavioral problems and gets restrained at some point on a daily basis. I saw his parents one day because they live in government-subsidized housing close by and walk him to school. It was 50 degrees out and the little boy was in a basketball jersey and shorts. His parents looked exactly how I expected them to look and were rude to all the staff they interacted with. It showed me that no matter how much we do, he spends most of his life with his crappy parents. Having a child with behaviors doesn't inherently make someone a bad parent, but in our program specifically, most of the students come from harsh backgrounds which either causes or exacerbates their behavior. I had a student say, "I don't need to learn any of this. I won't use it in real life." When I tried to explain why math was going to be useful, he responded, "You're a dumb idiot. Watch me get rich without even going to school." I mean, it's been done, but probably not the best idea. Paraphrased, are we ever going to use this as an adult? I mean, you won't, but some of the smart kids will. I worked in vet clinics for 15 years. Here's an example of something I heard every day. Me. "Okay, go ahead and set the carrier on the scale." Owner. "Do you want me to take the cat out?" No, we don't want the cat loose in the clinic. Just go ahead and put the carrier with the cat on the scale. Owner puts the cat carrier on the scale. I write down the weight. "Okay, let's head into the exam room." "But how much does the cat weigh?" "When we get you into a secured room, we'll get the cat out and weigh the carrier." "But how will you know how much the cat weighs?" Algebra. This happens every day. I had one student at a bilingual school in Mexico, who after being at the school and supposedly learning English for 5+ years, still couldn't speak it and barely tried to make any effort to learn anything, didn't do assignments and failed almost every test. When we mentioned it to her parents, their attitude was that she doesn't really need it because she'll just marry someone who'll take care of everything for her. My thought was, who would want to marry someone who doesn't know anything and makes no effort? Just this week, I have a student in grade 5 that's pretty oppositional, has a tough home life, etc. He doesn't always try very hard, but sometimes I can see he's trying to put in some effort. We were talking about how I grade them and he interrupts the conversation with, "I don't care at all about my grades." And I thought, here we go, another rant about how unfair school is. I just want to know that I can keep getting better. Perfect. I got chills. Thank goodness. Excuse me for diverting from the subject momentarily. Sometimes I just need a more uplifting story in the middle of all this gloom. This is probably going to be buried, but I like to reference this one from time to time. I had a student who was a hoarder. He was one of those kids that we all remember who had the backpack that was filled with everything for every class. It looked like this kid carried around a small grocery cart on his back. One day I'm walking him to his locker to look for an assignment that I knew I'd given him before, and I smelled this nasty smell. Big surprise, it's his locker. Open it to find 89 cartons of chocolate milk stacked inside. That's not all. On the floor he had a pretty large mason jar filled with what looked like dead bugs. I asked him why he had so much milk in his locker, and he said, stone-faced, "To dip the bugs in." Never sure what happened to this kid when he left, but that was the most disturbing for me. I'm a second-grade teacher, and I have a boy who lies constantly, about anything. He was on camera watching the footage of himself punching a student in the face, and he crossed his arms and said, "If I didn't do it, then I didn't do it." The worst part is his mum believes every word he says and attacks the school for making him accountable for his actions. He's going to do something as an adult and go to jail. When they pull him away, I know he's going to be yelling, "If I didn't do it, I didn't do it!" 7th grade in the US. On the first day of class, the students each said what they did over the summer. One kid said he went to Germany. The kid sitting next to him audibly asked where that was, and if it was further away than Chicago. I thought he must have misunderstood what the first guy said, so I intervened. Chicago is about 100 miles away. Germany is in Europe. That's another continent entirely. The kid looked blankly at me and asked me what that was. The word continent. I was dumbfounded and gestured at the map of the world on the wall and pointed at the continents, thinking he must have learned to pronounce them differently or something. But nope, he literally didn't know what they were and never realized that the picture on the wall of the geography room was actually a map of the world? He was in 7th grade and he didn't know what a continent was, or have even a toddler's level of understanding of what a map was. I once had a student who didn't know what the answer to 5 times 5 was. This was in the preparatory year of a private medical university. Fear for the patients if she ever graduates. My mum is a nursing instructor and she has horror stories of people who have become nurses. The bad students are rude and entitled, and they either skip work, lie on it, or expect my mum to do every assignment with them, step by step after class. When the student starts to fail because they're not meeting the standards, the people above my mum will give them the alternative, easy busy work, assignments, so they can pass the program and the school will start to have good statistics. So if you get a nurse someday who's a butthole or seems like an idiot, then they probably are. Me. What country did the United States gain independence from? Student. Hispanic. Tynesha, that's an ethnicity. Nuh-uh, it's a country in Africa. Me, internally. Tynesha, you're freaking 13, what the hell? And then externally. Okay, can someone help Tynesha answer the question? Another student. France. I teach English in Japan and sometimes hear, I don't understand this because I'm Japanese. What a well-constructed sentence for a Japanese person. Well, they say it in Japanese. I had a senior say he didn't think it was fair. I've grown to hate that word, by the way. He didn't think it was fair that my exams used short answer questions instead of multiple choice. She said, some of us just aren't good writers. I responded that if you're a senior in college and can't string a few sentences together, something has gone wrong. She stormed out of class. My college juniors and seniors, yes plural, who tried to justify the Holocaust because there were a lot of Jewish people in Europe at the time. To make it worse, almost half of my family died in the Holocaust. They don't know this, not that it matters. Had my Year 2 private student try to turn over his study table on me. It didn't work, I slammed it down, and then screamed at me to write out his homework because that's what his mum pays me for. There's still hope, but it made me so sad and angry as he assumed I was of a lesser position than him just because I was being paid. Like, yeah, nah, bye. Minimum wage workers. What customer rules aren't you paid enough to actually enforce? I worked graveyard at a Jack in the Box near a community college. The line would get so long, I decided to give out a mystery treat to every passenger in the car. From free orange juice to Jumbo Jacks, everyone was a winner. Reminds me of the time I went to Taco Bell late one night and ordered a single taco, and when I came to grab my order from the drive-thru, I got a huge sack of like 20 tacos. I hit the mega jackpot. People sleeping in their cars overnight. I consistently work night shifts and see it all the time. We're meant to tap the windows and ask them to leave, but really, if someone has to sleep in their car and we have a huge empty car park, why kick someone while they're down? My favorite old folks aren't usually charged as much as they should be. I'm not about to tack on an extra 50 cents for extra peanut butter. If someone was awful to me, you bet your butt they would be paying the full price. I'd also give away muffins that wouldn't be sold the next morning. Super against the rules according to the boss because it encourages vagrants. But I also told my manager it was a dumb rule and I was doing it anyway, but wouldn't say where they were from. He didn't mind and didn't let the boss know. It didn't increase vagrants coming in, no harm, no foul. Sometimes those muffins were my meal of the day too. At Christmas, I forgot to charge someone for the box of groceries they were getting as a special treat for their kids. She was someone that always came in just for a coffee and for a treat on Fridays, and was the nicest lady living on a small pension. She'd always rather spend money on someone else, so she deserved it. Yup, giving away muffins is a love language to your favorite customers in hospitality. I remember that feeling of giving the nice ones something for being decent folks. Made for great regular customers who would brighten your day next time they came in. I worked at an airline. The minimum change fee was $75. At the time, that amount of money would take me about 10 hours to earn. Let me tell you how many ways I found to waive that fee. Oh, what a great conversation about weather. Let me waive that fee for you. Oh, and your child is crying in the background. Let me waive that fee for you. I found any reason to waive that. In Disney World, I worked at Cirque du Soleil. They would throw away all the food at the end of the night, but nothing got me more upset than the cotton candy. It cost them like 15 cents a bag to make, but sold it for $5.50, and then they would throw it away. I used to grab bags and give them to the guests for free. Also gave away popcorn and hot dogs and stuff. No use letting it go to waste. The Cirque team was extremely small, maybe 14 employees on payroll, with about 8 on shift at a given time. Yet we serviced over 6,400 people in 2 shows each day. A typical shift went like this. Go in at 4 p.m. and prepare for 6. Management will give you how many hot dogs, cotton candy, pretzels, and popcorn to make. When 5:30 rolled around, we opened the doors and sold. Then, after the show finishes at 7:30, live show, so it varied, we would restock depending on how good we did during the first show, and the number we're expecting for the second. We make adjustments and prepare for the next show. Around 8:30, we open the doors, sell. Once the show is on, there will rarely be someone buying stuff. They spent $80 a ticket to watch an 85-minute show. I'd be darned if they were going to miss a second of it. After the show, 3,200 people are rushing out, so when the theatre was about 80% empty, if I knew we were going to have an abundance of stuff left over, I was doing it long enough to accurately gauge, I'd just give it away. No harm done. I worked at the Costco hot dog stand. One of my coworkers volunteer tested at an animal shelter. She would take the extra hot dogs at the end of the night and bring them to the shelter to feed the dogs. Management found out and fired him over it. It teed me off because he stole nothing but garbage. People paying with expired coupons for anything that wasn't medicine. I worked in retail pharmacy and we had to let customers make their front store purchases at the pharmacy if they wanted to. I just scanned all the expired coupons anyway because it wasn't worth the trouble of having an argument with the customer and increasing the amount of time that they were on the line. Obviously, with those RX coupons, it was another story, as overriding that could be considered insurance fraud. At minimum wage, the only things I would care about are the things that would get me arrested or would keep me up at night. Not a worker, but I was being assisted by a minimum wage worker at a chain arcade. Me and my friend were figuring out what we could afford to get from the little rewards area, and we started to sit down and begin counting. He saw us and said, "Nah, don't worry, they don't pay me enough to care." We still felt bad, so we put some of the candy we got back. He started scanning our point cards and the rewards. We had an extra 5 to 10 pieces of candy, and he was like, "Oh, looks like you can't afford it." Then he slid all of the candy into the bag and handed it to us. 10 out of 10 employee. I hope he's doing well. I work at a pizza joint that has a redemption center, kinda like Chuck E. Cheese. I do this all the time, especially for birthday kids. If it's their birthday and they want something, I just ask them, "Well, it's your birthday? What do you want? Pick anything you like." They want the thing that has 1,000 tickets? Fine. It costed us $5, and your parents probably gave you $10 anyway. It's your birthday. You just go be a prince or princess. A couple of years ago, I worked at a deli inside of a Walmart neighborhood market, aka just groceries. Every 3 hours, we had to mark rotisserie chickens and other foods on the hot plates down 50%. If people were kind or looked like they could use some help, I would mark them down almost any time. I couldn't tell you how many folks came in who I would just give a few extra slices of cheese or ham to for free, and just how their faces lit up. They definitely needed it more than Walmart. Having worked in multiple movie theaters, I can tell you that the ushers absolutely give 0 Fs about you trying to sneak food in from the outside. It's a minimum wage job, they have no interest in hassling people or getting into a confrontation over the bag of peanut M&Ms in your purse. It's a million times easier to just turn a blind eye. There was one family that used to come to the movies almost every week. They would always bring their grandma, who was in a wheelchair, and she always had a box of pizza on her lap covered by a shawl, and this was obvious to everyone. It's a fresh, hot pizza, for frick's sake. You can smell it from 30 feet away. I honestly just thought about telling them that I didn't care if they were bringing in food, but then I thought that maybe that's the only reason they brought grandma, and I didn't want to take that away from her. I love the extra little considerate touch of holding your tongue to specifically make sure that the grandma is continued to be included in family movie night. Although it would be pretty callous of the family to just cut her out once they knew they could bring pizza themselves. I used to work in town at an auto parts store with a lot of gang activity. Every now and then, some monstrously muscular dude covered in tats would walk in and grab 2 batteries off the rack. We assumed for the hydraulics most were using, and walk out. We would just wave and say, "Have a nice day," rather than get the crap beat out of us. We'd just write it off as a store loss. Using the bathroom if you aren't actually a customer. We're the only place open at 3 in the morning. I'm not going to tell people to go find somewhere else. I had this backfire a number of times on me, actually. After relenting on the not a public restroom rule, people just messed the entire bathroom up to say thank you. Years back, I worked at a local chain restaurant that had a drive-thru. One of the owners would occasionally come through and reiterate that we were only to give 1 ketchup packet per order of fries at the drive-thru. Our fry orders were huge and 1 packet was nowhere near enough, so as soon as he was gone, we'd go back to throwing handfuls of ketchup packets into the bags. Long time ago, I ordered a bunch of Taco Bell for myself and 4 friends. It was about 2 a.m. and we were surf fishing in a small SoCal town. Anyway, after the highly stoned worker handed me my huge bag of fries, he asked me what kind and how much sauce I wanted. I replied, "A frick ton of mild, please," and he proceeded to hand me an entire box of it. I work as a lifeguard at a theme park, first job, and one thing some customers do is pretend they're going to faint or they're having heat-related problems, so they can get us to call into base and get them free food or drinks. Sometimes I really wish I was a bad person. They really do know how to game the system. Not me, but my boyfriend worked a store in a large mall. The store refuses to put security sensors in because it ruins the laid-back vibe of the store. They wanted you to chase shoplifters. One girl working there almost got maced. A male coworker was threatened to be stabbed. He just didn't care and wouldn't chase. He would just tell the manager on duty what happened. Some of the managers never listened. The security in the mall is awful. So bad that a different store a friend was working at, where their employees actually got attacked for trying to stop a shoplifter, that store hired their own private security to protect their employees. Nobody working minimum wage should get threatened to be fired for not chasing shoplifters who are threatening them bodily harm. I've worked a ton of retail jobs. When they do training about shoplifting, the first thing every single one said was never ever chase a shoplifter. Get a good look at them and call the cops, but it's not your job to catch criminals, and it's illegal to detain people. All you can do is call the cops. If the item doesn't have a price, I usually just let the customer name it if they're nice. We're supposed to have someone check the price, but that usually takes an incredibly long time, and as everyone's busy, I save that for the buttholes. I worked at a deli and I had the power to override the price per pound anytime I felt like it. So if a customer was upset, I'd give them half off. Or if they had a cool shirt, I didn't really care. This reminds me of when I worked in a supermarket and got minimum wage. They would sometimes ask me to work the bakery. I'd give the kids free cookies and then offer one to the parent. I read here that Dairy Queen requires you to charge for anything extra when ringing someone up. But after you purchase it, if you ask the person making it for extra whatever, they throw it in for free. Soda in a water cup. My local McDonald's has a rule where you have to pay $1 for a water cup, so I took a ketchup holder and filled it up. Aren't those really tiny? Yeah, the struggle is real. Shots, 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 shots! I work at an online diaper bag company, and if a bag was returned, I was supposed to find out if it was a defect or the customer's fault to decide how to issue a replacement. When a frantic, hormonal new mom would call me, getting ready to rant and put her foot down, I would always interrupt their story and just ask for their address and what type of bag they wanted and ship it for free. No way am I being paid enough to get in that argument. I don't care if they're carrying large bricks in the bag. Take a new one. To be clear, this was the same response whether people called in upset or not. All I wanted was to get off the phone call and finish work. If you cared enough to call, then you convinced me. I was not interested in arguing with any moms, regardless of the initial demeanor. Yeah, I have complete sympathy with people taking customer complaints, and to be honest, I'm never turned away by these people, so I'd say most of them have the same policy as you. This kind of service can actually pay off significantly in customer loyalty. Last winter, I ordered a few bottles of flavored coffee syrup from a large online retailer. I didn't think the bottles might be glass, and nobody on their end considered that shipping glass bottles of syrup in -20-degree weather may not work out well. Suffice it to say that what arrived in the box was more bulk snow cones with glass chips than bottles of syrup, which also ruined a couple of other items packaged in there. I got in touch with them, armed with pictures, and expected to have to show them the damage. Instead, within a couple of minutes, I effortlessly had an account credit applied. They offered to ship replacements, but I declined since they would have had the same fate. The result was that not only did I not hesitate to buy more coffee syrup from them, in appropriate weather, but it boosted my confidence in buying any product from them. And I buy a lot of stuff online nowadays. I worked at a hardware store in a garden center making close to minimum wage. We often loaded heavy bags of mulch and dirt for customers in their truck beds and whatnot. We were told that we were not allowed to take tips from customers. So being the good boy that I was, I turned down a couple of tips until one day I loaded up a full customer pickup bed and he handed me $20. I told him I can't take that and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do they really pay you so much that you don't need it?" I stopped being an idiot that day. Why the frick I let someone pay me so little and tell me I'm not allowed to make more, and how I listened to that is just embarrassing now. Worked at Target, they had the same store policy. But my manager also said just take it anyway because they had someone complain about someone refusing to take a tip as being rude a week or two prior. Sometimes I'd just buy a box or two of fruit snacks for everyone and toss them in the break room with it. I used to be a cashier at Walmart. No crap, I had someone try to give me a $50 tip for knowing how to do my job properly. I desperately needed it, but I couldn't take it as there are cameras and I was scared crapless that I was going to get fired. He insisted, so I put it in the donation jar. That's so terrible at a low-wage job in which generally customer service can't get paid enough, they can't accept a tip from a customer for providing quality service. I work in retail and part of my job is helping customers load furniture purchases into their car. Unfortunately, most of our customers never really expected to be buying furniture when they came in, just by the nature of where I work, so they oftentimes come in vehicles that are grossly unfit for the job. I've had to help customers try to lift love seats and sofas into the back of their sedans, for example. Well, one day after I'd been there a few weeks, I got called into the furniture department for customer assistance. So I go out there with a flatbed cart and meet the lady who bought a large chest. We get it on the cart and I push it out into the parking lot. Then she points me to her tiny little car. I can immediately tell there's no way in heck it's going to fit, but she's convinced we can make it work. About 20 minutes later, she actually proves me wrong. As we're saying our goodbyes, she pulls a $5 bill out of her wallet and offers it to me. I tell her that I just started there recently, and so I actually wasn't sure if I'm allowed to accept tips. She said something along the lines of, "It'll just be our little secret." And after thinking for a moment, I said, frick it, helping her was way more trouble than the $3 I was paid in those 20 minutes. So I took her money, went back inside and casually asked my boss if I was allowed to accept tips. "No," he said. "Don't get yourself fired over an extra $1 or $2. I briefly considered handing him the money and apologizing for accepting it, despite not being sure I was allowed to. Instead, I told him, "Okay, I only ask because that furniture call I just helped with was going to offer me a tip before she realized she didn't have any cash on her. Made me realize I didn't actually know, so I'm just asking for future reference." Oh no, wouldn't want to lose this minimum wage job taking money offered by thankful customers that in no way costs the business anything. Massive retail corporations really just are the worst, aren't they? Work your minimum wage employees to the bone and flat out block them from taking gifts from grateful customers. No way that I wouldn't take that money. I work at Target and we aren't allowed to do anything to physically stop people from stealing. If someone's trying to be sneaky, we're supposed to say, "I think you forgot that in your cart." But if you wanted to grab something and just walk away with it, only thing we can do is tell asset protection. Back when I worked for Home Depot, one of the guys in hardware watched someone stuff screws and nails and other small items into their pockets. My coworker walked up behind him and scared the frickin' crap out of him by yelling, "So, are you gonna pay for those or what?" He got in huge trouble but wasn't fired, and it was funny as frick watching someone flail about with nails flying out of their pants. Whenever I shop at a department store, I always try to find the most disgruntled-looking cashier. I've had cashier bags that weren't scanned. They didn't care, and I don't say anything. That happened to me at Michael's, a crafts store, a few days before Christmas. The store is absolute hell on earth, and my cashier was a weary, 16-ish-year-old guy who was just done. He had the 1,000-yard stare, poor kid. He was mumbling on about how his girlfriend is mad at him because something about her birthday and how all the customers are just so mean and scary. I don't think he was even talking to me. I think he was just having a stream of consciousness. Anyway, I notice he's just shoving things into a plastic bag, so I say, "I think you forgot to ring some of those things up." He looks at me in a daze and says, "You look like a nice lady and I just can't do this anymore, so here you go." Wow. Thanks, fam. Hope you had a happy holiday. Used to work at a movie theater. No one cares if you bring your own snacks, although it's super aggravating if you just leave your snack garbage at the theater instead of taking it out with you. We usually have an hour window where all the theaters are getting out. We tend to have about 10 minutes per theater to clean on a busy day. Leaving your garbage in your seats makes everything slower. It's not hard to carry it down to the can. I work in an electronics retail store. We have a standard price match guarantee, 14 days with a receipt. I had a woman come in and give me a huge attitude and explain that she brought this TV 2 days ago and paid $3,199 for it, and that one of our competitors had it for $2,999 and she demanded her money back, plus the 10% difference. I made her wait and pretended to check with the manager. Well, when I looked it up, we were currently selling it for $2,500. So I went over with a huge smile and told the mean woman who was giving me dirty looks the whole time, "Sure, Mom, we can match the $2,999 for you and the 10% of their $200 difference." So she walked out thinking she won the battle, paying $2,979 for her TV. When, if she was nice, I would have given it to her for our sale price of $2,499. Being a B-word cost her $480. As a valet, we would reuse tickets and just pocket the cash to park as our tip on slow days. The manager never counted how many cars we parked or how many tickets we used. I was taught this by my coworkers on my first day. It was the only way to make money. Also, I never asked for ID when selling M-rated games to people who looked under 17 at a major retailer. It's not a law, and my supervisor didn't care as he wanted as many sales as he could get. Used to wait tables. People couldn't bring their own drinks, booze, or just water. I honestly didn't care if I saw them bring their own, as ours was way overpriced. One day, this obviously broke couple came in to celebrate something, and they asked for tacos and a big bottle of beer, but were discouraged by the price of the bottle. So I told them they could buy a bottle from the store on the other side of the street. It was half the price, and if it was warm, I could exchange it for one of our cold ones. I think I was too nice to people, though. I've never encountered another waitress or waiter who would be as nice as I was, but meh, it felt good and the bosses could never tell. A coffee shop I worked at was so poorly managed that I practically gave free drinks to the 5 to 7 customers that we actually had on a regular basis. The manager and owner were always in China and the few customers were usually our friends. I even took on double shifts so I'd get paid more. We let the customers do whatever the heck they wanted, and it even got to a point where they played Smash Brothers in the back. They even hung out in the kitchen to cook food. As employees, we probably broke every universal employment law possible. It was the chillest minimum wage job I had, but unfortunately it came to an end when the entire staff except myself decided to go to EDC and my manager happened to show up that one day. About 22 years ago, I worked in a Kmart that had a diner and I was the dishwasher. One day, a waitress came up to me and asked me to clean a mess in the ladies' room. In my ignorance, I'd just assumed someone had spilled the trash or something that innocuous. I opened the door and everything looked fine. I opened the first 2 stalls and everything still looked fine. Then I opened the 3rd stall. Some lady had projectile crapped all over the back wall of the stall. It was a tremendous amount of liquefied crap. So, after dry heaving a number of times, I leave the ladies' room. I informed the head waitress that there was no way in heck I was going to touch that mess. She whined and moaned about it, but I wouldn't budge. She called the store manager down to the restaurant and he started yelling at me to clean up the mess in front of everyone else. I flat out refused and told him to go take a look for himself. I grabbed a dish bucket from the opposite end of the restaurant and on my way back I saw him come out of the restroom. On his way out, he stopped by the hostess and told her to put up an out-of-order sign. They ended up hiring a professional cleaning service to take care of it. Apparently, he didn't get paid enough to deal with that crap either. Non-Americans. What's the craziest rumor you heard about America that turned out to be true? Surfer dudes actually speak like that. Californians actually speak like that too. This video feels like a nice little full circle on my first video with the channel, which was about things that surprised non-Americans about the US. Thanks for watching these last few months, folks. I'm from Quebec, and when we went down to Boston for a school trip, I sneezed in public and heard 2 or 3 people say, "Bless you." Quite a weird rumor I had heard not 2 months prior to that. I thought it was nice.
Wait, you don't say bless you when someone sneezes? I mean, it's not like it means anything, so I could understand why. It just seems so strange not to say anything.
I mean, how else were we supposed to deal with the demons that escape through sneezes? That people actually get attacked by alligators which got in their pools, specifically referring to Florida here. There are boa constrictors in Florida as well. So apparently yellow school buses are actually a thing in America. I honestly thought it was a cartoon thing, but nope. That Dolly Parton has her own theme park in Tennessee. I thought it was a joke. That woman is a saint. She has a book program for children where, once they're born, they'll receive a free children's book once a month until they turn 5. That's amazing!
She absolutely is. She's done amazing things for people, especially where she grew up. She deserves far more credit than she already has. My 2 sons are in that program, and she eats at the Mexican restaurant across the street from my house. I live in Nashville. She's super sweet and down to earth. I always thought that Olive Garden in The Simpsons was just code for generic restaurant. I mean, that's not entirely incorrect. Olive Garden is probably the closest you could get to beige if restaurants were colors. And when I first saw The Big Bang Theory, I thought for years that the Cheesecake Factory was a made-up restaurant. 'Tis such a silly name. If I don't like someone but I'm still socially obligated to get them a gift, I get them a gift card for Olive Garden or Applebee's. I studied in Maryland for about half a year back in 2017. I'd always heard that Americans are like super good at pie. I was pretty much all alone during Thanksgiving since everyone else was with their families. One of the RAs I'd befriended knocked on my door and bought me all different kinds of pie. Dear Lord, I've never tasted anything that delicious. From blueberry to apple to pumpkin. Every single pie. They were all amazing. I actually don't properly know if this is true, but you have like a whole aisle in your supermarkets dedicated to just the hundreds of cereals you have. Mostly true. It's cereal and other breakfast items like granola and oatmeal, but mostly cereal. All the food is bigger. Free refills.
I'm from Australia, and all my life I believed red Solo cups were like 555 area codes, a Hollywood prop. When I emigrated to the US, my mother-in-law was making dinner,
and offered me iced tea in a red Solo cup. I lost it, made everyone sign the cup, and I've still got it. The Solo cup stories always kill me. We had some German exchange students in high school, and one of them loved how many American things were just like in the movies. We rode in the back of a truck to a pizza place for lunch that day, and he was loving it. In the afternoon, there was a party/get-together at someone's house. The kid was eyeing the stack of Solo cups and coyly asked, "Can I keep one?" We said sure, and the red Solo cup was the cherry on top of his American experience that day. Masked people come to your house, knock on your door asking for candy. Mostly it's just packs of kids, but sometimes it's whole families. This was my friend's Halloween culture shock. It's a ton of fun to hang out next to the walkway in a costume, pretending to be one of the decorations and scare people as they walk past you. Sports bars are actually exactly how they're portrayed on the TV. Yeah, just much less attractive people. Drink sizes. Holy crap. When my family visited in 2017, we landed in Texas for a stopover. First thing I saw in the shops, part of the terminal, was a dude who was drinking from what actually looked like an actual frickin' bucket. Here in New Zealand, our large drinks would be considered an American small or maybe medium. We need bigger cups than most of the world since over half the cup is filled with ice. Not exactly crazy, but I wanted to test out the stereotype that Americans will talk to anyone, so I sought out a sports bar on my first visit. Ended up having a ton of really fun conversations with total strangers who I'll never talk to again. It was great! American, I will speak to anyone about anything. I can't even count the number of times I've randomly started conversations with strangers, become friends within 30 minutes, then never spoken to them again. When I started traveling for work, I'd often find myself in bars or on flights and buses alone, so I'd end up starting a conversation so I could have some human interaction. As a Canadian, it amazes me how much people around the world keep to themselves. I go to a big ski hill in the mountains a lot and look forward to chilling on ski lifts, chatting with some of the wise old skier dudes. I have long, heartfelt conversations with random's dads on airplanes, and it's great. Again, naturalized European narrator here, it seems like such a damn culture shock to have random people engage in conversation and have, or at least seem to have, genuine interest in the conversation. It's deeply unnatural, but quite pleasant for us. Biscuits and gravy is a legit thing. Also, you can ride motorcycles without helmets in some states, and your iced tea isn't sweetened unless you ask for sweet. Nothing could have possibly prepared me for the absolute dichotomy of sweet tea versus iced teas in the comments to this. This is evidently very important to many. A good sausage gravy with sage and black pepper, with some good flaky biscuits, is one of the best southern comfort foods, along with a cup of strong, sweet iced tea. Crazy hospitable. Turned out to be true. Talkative. Turned out to be true as well. $2 bills. American state and national parks are some of the most beautiful places on Earth. All parks could use more funding, but American parks are well-staffed and maintained. There's real pride there. I love our national and state park systems. One of my state parks recently got a herd of bison, which I haven't seen in the wild since my trip to Yellowstone. The week I graduate, I'm going to go see them and relax in nature. The minimal amount of paid days off you can get from work. A friend of mine from Wisconsin was very proud he got 20 days off per year. If someone in Germany would offer me only 20 days, I would laugh at him and leave. So student loans. How does it work in the USA? In the UK, when you go to a university, you take out a student loan, and after uni, when you earn a certain amount per year, a percentage above that threshold goes towards paying it back. However, if you don't earn that much, I don't know how much, maybe 20 to 25k per year, then you pay nothing. Then after a while, if you haven't paid it back, 30 years, maybe 40, then it just disappears and you don't have to pay it. In America, do you have to pay regardless of income? Is there a time limit after which debt expires and disappears? No. The only time the debt expires or disappears is if you die or pay it off. Most people have co-signers, which tend to be parents or family members, so even if they die, the co-signer will be forced to pay the student loan debt, on top of dealing with the loss of a loved one. Americans are nice and will stop to talk to strangers. Canadian here, living in Alberta. To anyone who's never been, you'll be blown away by the general Americans' generosity of their time, knowledge, and helpfulness. I've done a few summers of road trips from Calgary. One time I went to as far east as Ohio, Tennessee, as far south as New Orleans and Dallas, went through the flatlands, and rode up the Rockies the rest of the way home. I have visited almost all the landlocked states, 5 more to go, and 4 along the Gulf states, all by car. I've been through a lot of big American cities and a lot of tiny towns.
All of you, north to south, make Canadians look like bloody savages. I expected something worse, probably because of television and internet. I ended up leaving your country after the first time I visited, blown away and with a newfound very real love for my southern neighbors. Been 5 times on multi-week trips. We'll spend time and money there again. 10 out of 10. America has libraries that are essentially free to use. This was not even a rumor, but more like a sarcastic comment from a friend who heard I was excited to go to the US because he knew what book nerds my entire family are. When I first arrived here 25 years ago, the first day of work at Newark, New Jersey, I walked out at lunchtime and saw the huge central library. The size boggled my mind, but I bravely walked in to check it out. The guy says, "Yep, show me your work ID or local address, and you get a membership card." Me? How much does it cost? I only own $80 until I get my first pay. Him? Bemused, almost laughing. "It's free. You don't pay for anything." It took me some time to recover from the shock of this. So, how many books am I allowed to take home? I was expecting that to be a catch. Maybe I need to put down a security deposit for each book. He was now positively enjoying himself. How many can you carry? That day I took home 30+ books, just being greedy, and quickly called my dad to tell him about it. For a guy who painstakingly would browse used bookstores in small-town India just to get his kids great books to read, he was suitably amazed. He was puzzled if it would kill the bookstore business, because who'd buy if such great free libraries existed? Up to the present day, I feel such gratitude for being able to come here, and when Dad visited some years later, I would drop him off at a library on my way to work, and he'd be lost in it all day. To address some of the questions people are now sending me, yes, by take home I meant borrowed to return. Carrying those books home has a story too. The librarian saw my dilemma and wanted to stick to his original "how many can you carry" comment, and would not allow me to discard any, so went off and got me 2 large bags made of cloth or canvas, like grocery bags. And when I lugged all of that on the train back to New Jersey that evening, I had to walk home from the train station, no car, to a mile away. Normally not bad, but with those books, it was tedious. A cop saw me and gave me a lift home. He loved my story about the library too. India today is slightly better, but as a kid in a small town, the only library I saw was at my school, where books were never allowed to be taken home. And then there was this single shop where you subscribed to borrow some pulp fiction. The Asiatic Library in Bombay was big. I saw it when I visited my cousins, but it had a wait list, I think, of 4 years, because they couldn't handle too many members. I'm always amazed at what all libraries offer. I took my parents for a movie showing once, set up as a once-a-month thing for seniors, and they were shocked that it was free. And they were giving away cookies and stuff too, along with pleasant company. My girls have learned to love the library as much as I do, and probably have read more books than most kids at school. My daughter won an award for some accelerated reading, and at age 9 gave a speech about the impact of libraries for her, and how much her dad and grandpa loved them. Thank you, libraries and librarians. This started off as a simple praise of America's libraries, but turned into a really cute, fresh-off-the-boat story that would probably make a number of people want to move to the land of the free. Maybe do your research first, though, folks.
As an American, I think you could ask the title question to Americans, 'cause there are some weird friggin' states, man. Dry counties, cities where places aren't allowed to be open on a Sunday, or there can only be certain hours on Sunday. Not being able to pump your own gas. Whoa, there are places where you can't pump your own gas? I feel like I'm an idiot for not knowing this.
Oregon here, can confirm. Afraid to drive outside the state because I don't know how to pump my own gas. That you can identify Texans with the simple phrase, "The stars at night are big and bright," and someone else will go, "Deep in the heart of Texas." That Hawaiians really like Spam. Yeah, and there's a perfectly good reason for it too. After Pearl Harbor, the effects of World War II started in the US and rationing became a thing. Well, it turns out that it's kind of hard to get fresh rations to an island that imports a lot. So, for meat, they had to make do with Spam. Human ingenuity prevails and dishes were made, and that's how Hawaii learned to love Spam. The honking. I thought it was a movie stereotype. Then I went to New York.
It's rare outside the big cities though, in my opinion.
If you think that's bad, try going to India. Parents were from the USSR. They were freaking shocked about how nice you Americans are. They said that y'all were a weird type of nice, but nice regardless. It didn't even matter that they were from the USSR, moved to the States post-collapse. You Americans seemed to accept them anyway.
I, American, had such a pleasant interaction with a tourist from Russia the other day, in Walmart of all places. I saw a man that clearly looked confused in the auto section, so I walked toward him and he tried to explain what he was looking for, but he hardly spoke any English at all. So I pulled my phone out to use Google Translator and told him to speak into my phone. The translation came back that he was looking for detergent for bugs in love bed, so I took him to an aisle to look for bed bug killer. He looked so confused and pulled out a piece of paper that had "Love Bug Wash" written on it in English, so I took him back to the auto section and helped him pick out some car soap. He kept saying, "God bless," to me. We laughed a lot through the process, and I thought it was so cool that we could speak different languages but still communicate. To clarify, love bug is a type of fly. We call them love bugs because after mating, adult pairs remain coupled, even in flight, for up to several days, like they're in love. But we get them in huge numbers during mating season, spring or summer. Because of this, a lot of cars will be covered in these love bugs that they ran into the road. This is Florida, by the way. Sorry, I let this one get quite far off track, because I was so interested in the gosh darn love bugs. Also, why do all the weirdest things seem to converge on Florida? They have milk in gallon cartons. When I visited America, I went to a supermarket for some breakfast stuff, cereal and milk. All they had was milk in gallons. Who could possibly have that much milk? I asked for a smaller carton, and the lady who worked there just laughed at me and asked me if we just don't like milk in England very much. Many supermarkets have half gallons and quarter gallons, but honestly, I'm surprised that it's an issue. I live alone and go through a gallon of milk in just a few days. I drink at least 7 gallons a day to ensure I get enough calcium. That American kids eat straight sugar. Walked onto the playground and saw kids chugging these long, thin sticks. I'd try and it was just colored sugar. They called them pixie sticks. Oh boy, wait till you find out about Fun Dips. You have a hard candy stick, so all sugar, that you lick and then dip into a colored sugar sack to make it stick to the sugar stick. Then you lick the sugar powder off the sugar stick. After you finish all the powder, you eat the stick. Before I came to the States, as we called it, I lived in Germany. The area I lived in had no fireflies. So when I got to the States, I did not believe my eyes, as I finally saw fireflies light up the world as I fell asleep. I also thought that New York City was a popular fictional city. I didn't believe it actually existed. At the time, it seemed too large and extraordinary to possibly exist. For those talking about other countries, I didn't know there were other countries at the time either. I only knew of places I had lived, which was Germany and soon to be the US. I was never told about the concept of countries until I went to an American school. The "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" song that's apparently sung at baseball games. Still not entirely sure that guy wasn't taking the mickey out of me. Female here. I've been in bathrooms where the gap between the stall and the door is so big I felt the need to cover it with my purse just to get some privacy. The absolute worst is when some mother brings her grubby-handed son into the bathroom and you see a freaking 8-year-old's eye staring at you from the other side of the door. That your country is huge. I got off the plane and asked the cab guy how far the hotel was, and he said about 30 miles. I almost had a heart attack. Turns out cabs are cheaper than the UK though. I can't remember the price I paid, but I was pleasantly surprised. The UK cabs are like £4 per mile. Also, you would get laughed out of the taxi for asking to go 30 miles and not taking the train. Not really crazy, but I just learned you guys have like outdoor sirens that get tested somewhat frequently. I've only heard those noises in video games and movies until my friend sent me a clip, because I had no idea it actually happened. In many areas of the US, these sirens are used to warn of impending severe weather and potential tornadoes. Sirens are tested on the first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. around Chicago. My dad heard this crazy rumor about everyone getting drunk and wearing green for one day a year. He obviously didn't know this was a holiday and was like, WTF. When he came to the US and he discovered St. Patrick's Day, he was amazed. My dad is from China, for you affronted Irish people. St. Patrick's Day in the US is an excuse for ordinary Americans to act the way that middle-aged Londoners act when on holiday in Dublin, only with more plastic leprechaun hats and glitter. Yeah, and on top of that, suddenly everyone's part Irish. When I say suddenly part Irish, I'm not implying everyone's lying. A lot of them are probably telling the truth since there's so many Irish Americans. What I meant is that no one mentions this fact until St. Patrick's Day. People of Walmart. One of the nicest people in one of the towns I lived in is pictured on People of Walmart. He's known as Willie the Pimp, or just Mr. Willie. Older gentleman, just likes to dress flashy because it makes people smile to see beautiful things. Before he got too old to drive, you could spot his car by the flower arrangements he attached to the side of the front bumper. As a Brit living in America, the amount of pharmaceutical commercials on TV is creepy. Smiling person living life to the fullest. Narrator? Side effects include anal bleeding, gigantism, lupus, skin shedding, and death. Ask your doctor about Prolax today. The SAT exam being multiple choice. Multiple choice exams in general. That you can get into university just by being good at sports. Like what the frick? Yep, most schools have academic and athletic scholarships, not just academic ones. It's not always a full ride, and you still have to qualify academically, which is occasionally a problem, but that's usually a bare minimum baseline. The reason is that college sports are almost as popular as professional sports, especially football and basketball. Those sports bring money and fame to players and schools, so it's common for schools to try and get the best players to commit. The school I went to, UVA, won the most recent college basketball championship, and now they're well known around the US. Nearly every man is circumcised regardless of religion. Checking in, Catholic. Am snipped. I had an interaction with a British friend online where I said that something looks like a flaccid pee-pee, and he was really confused. When I traced over what I was saying, we realized that I was picturing a flaccid, circumcised pee-pee, and he, being more familiar with the uncut variety, hadn't seen what I did. It was the first time I realized that other parts of the world wouldn't be inclined to circumcise every male child. Now I'm just not sure why it's so pervasive in the US to begin with. They have garbage disposals in their kitchens. That's so wild to me. To clarify, I'm from the UK. I'm aware that they're not the same as bins or trash cans and that they're mainly for food waste and scraps. I'm also delighted that they're called garberators in Canada. Homeowners associations. What the frick is up with that? The place that my wife and I bought came with a busybody of an HOA president. We got a fricking note stapled to our gate that said our clothes line had to be removed because it was an eyesore. So I wrote back and told her about how crappy our dryer is, and that we're in the fricking desert anyway, so hanging them up is the most environmentally friendly way to dry clothes anyway. Still got another note during laundry day the following week, so I stapled a note to her door that said, "If you want me to have a good dryer, then buy me one. Otherwise, kindly F off." Haven't heard from her since, not even a note. Hope she's okay. When you sail west, you arrive in America and not India. Then why do they call them Indians? Phew, this guy. Can you really just buy a Glock at Walmart? At my local Walmart, you can bring your car in for an oil check, get an eye exam, get a haircut, eat lunch at the in-store Subway, purchase a Glock, purchase groceries, purchase a frickin' couch, then go home once the background check for the Glock is finished and the oil change is done. Other things I forgot to add, you can purchase alcohol depending on state. You can get your taxes done there, you can get your birthday cake made, print pictures from a USB, phone, etc., get dog tags made, get spare keys made, rent movies, pick up a full-course meal for dinner at the deli.
What's the most ridiculous rule in your place of work? I'm a teacher, so I have a million stupid rules I have to follow. But the worst one is that my performance evaluation is based on student improvement on the STAR literacy test. I teach woodshop. At my old job, HR held a meeting to tell us that there was too much swearing on the sales floor. Someone raised their hand and pointed out that swearing is very common in our industry, and that it is the way that our customers speak. HR later sent out a memo explaining that swearing should be limited to conversations with clients. It was amazing. Please only swear when in the presence of a customer. All customers should be greeted with a jolly, "What the frick is up?" or a chipper, "Who the frick crapped on you today, you B-word?" Any attempts to not insult or demean our customers will be written up. Frick you and have a great day. HR. Somewhere I have the email printed out. I had a crazy crap folder where I kept nutty emails, and that HR memo was definitely one of the best. If you are stuck in traffic on the way to work, you must email the CEO. Phone calls and texts are not permitted, only email. I'd get that one in writing and send it to the corporate insurer. If you're supposed to email the CEO when you're late, there's probably no corporate insurer. There's probably not much of a corporation for that matter. I used to work at a place in which my boss implemented a no more than 2 glasses of water a day policy. What a chump. I ignored this rule and complained directly to our CEO, and the matter ended later that day. What was weird though was that the majority of people actually followed the rule, and some even shopped me up to HR about breaking the rules. I left not long after that because not only was my boss a member, but if my colleagues were going to HR over me drinking water, then I obviously couldn't trust them. What industry was this where they felt the need to limit water drinking? Sadly, they were probably trying to limit bathroom breaks. As a man who is guzzling water from dawn to dusk, admittedly, probably just because voice acting is a little tough on the throat, I would revolt if a boss tried to implement this. Had a workplace time our bathroom breaks and deduct them from our allotted 15-minute breaks for lunch. We had to go see the office manager to get a key to open the restroom. As soon as we left his office, he would start a timer. When you got back, he would stop the timer and tell you how much time you needed to deduct from your lunch or next break. They watched our breaks like a hawk. Also, if you made a mistake, they would stand over you and time you while you fixed it and deduct that from your lunch or breaks. You couldn't bring anything that smells for lunch, and they had no way of heating anything up. I worked out my contract and split. I would troll the heck out of that manager. Just pee in the sink. Then go ask for the bathroom key, be gone for 21 seconds, and give the key back. Do this often. Confuse the frick out of him while simultaneously interrupting his day 30 times. Worth it. Business casual dress code even when I work at home. They Skype me to check.
What the frick? Why? What business are you in?
Exactly my thoughts on it. I'm an intern for a small logistics company. My dad told me this one a while back. He used to work for a PR firm. The way he described the office environment, think The Office, but in the 1980s. The company hired a corporate efficiency specialist to come in and improve things. She came in and implemented all kinds of rules which seemed to follow some sort of caste system. Her philosophy was the higher your rank, the more perks you get. Her idea of perks? Number of pictures you're allowed in your cubicle. Whether you're allowed to have a potted plant or not. Coffee mugs were only allowed to senior employees. Others had to use paper cups. Being allowed to leave the office for lunch was also considered a perk. Needless to say, a coup soon followed and she was tossed out on her hiney. Dress code policy is just dumb at my work. Different positions have different requirements, even though we all work in the same office. My favorite rule, though, is the one on shorts. We can wear shorts on Fridays between Memorial Day and Labor Day. However, the shorts can't have pockets on the side. It was written to discourage ratty cargo shorts, but the way in which it was written allows me to wear gym shorts. So I do. Once worked at a place where some mini-boss decided that since UPS trucks don't turn left, we shouldn't either. I don't know if UPS trucks turn left or not, or if that is beneficial to them or not, and frankly, I don't care. The point is that mini-boss thought they did, and that was the reasoning he gave. He was an idiot, I didn't stay there long. This was a goddamn ambulance company with a 911 contract. I will turn left if and when I fricking need to turn left. Not my current job, but I used to work for some crazy people. You had to stand in a specific area while eating so they could see you on the camera. Don't talk to customers longer than 3 minutes unless you're making a big sale. Even then, keep it short. Answer the phone within 2 rings. Keep the conversation to less than 30 seconds. You can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. You can't talk to your coworkers while at work, even if there was not a single customer in the store. I'm sure there's more, I just can't think of them right now. Old job of mine in a warehouse. Our stations were pretty far apart, so when we'd listen to music, we'd all usually have our own stuff playing. Not a problem since you could barely hear the neighbor's music. Well, the CEO didn't like hearing multiple songs when walking through the warehouse. He made a rule that we all either had to listen to the same music or none at all. I'd put on the same song, but everyone started at 15 seconds apart. We got a new vacation policy where you could take unlimited time off. When he announced it, we looked at the big boss like he had a pee-pee growing out of his forehead. All the while, he assured us that if we wanted vacation, to take it. Really? A little bit awkward. He changed it to discretionary time off, meaning that if your boss approved, it was okay. Then changed it to 160 hours should be the max. And if you go over 200 hours, then you probably don't need to work here. I can't reconcile with how these people implement these policies and come across as a good person in their own heads. It's one thing to be desperate in rough times, but the sneakiness is what gets me. I once needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin. She told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco. I work in Milwaukee. So I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet.
This is my favorite one so far. It's so ridiculous in every way.
In my first one-on-one with my boss, she asked me how everything was going. I said fine, but explained that I wasn't able to get a pen, which made taking notes and meetings difficult. She got up, went to her desk, and grabbed me a handful of pens. If you had to take leave on Monday or Friday so that you had an extended weekend of 3 days instead of 2, it was counted as 3 days leave, counting Saturday and Sunday. Deal with that. This was in a small private company in India dealing with medical writing. If you're 1 minute late, it's tardy. If you take a half day, nothing goes on your record. I was told to just take a half day if you're going to be late because they straight up fire you for tardies. Also, if you clock out early, it's a tardy. If you have to go to the doctor on lunch break and it's going to take an hour and 10 minutes, take the rest of the day off. Weird. Firemen. Our risk management department decided long ago that poles were too risky for us. So we used the stairs. We have poles. Anyway, now the newest rule is no free weights, as in no free weights to work out and stay fit. Go into burning high-rise, absolutely. Walk around the station carrying 40-pound dumbbells, too risky.
I feel you. My fire department just got some workout equipment, rowing machine and bike, and it had been delayed due to liability concerns. But we actually have a fire pole that we use. It's all very confusing. We aren't allowed to wear jackets unless they're purchased from the resort gift shop with the hotel name logo on it. They're $50+ and we don't get reimbursed, but it's the price you pay to stay warm in the cold months. McDonald's did this to us when I worked there. They paid half, but they were still like $50 to $60 for a crappy fleece. I just wore my regular jacket and nobody said a thing. Former job. There was trouble when I, officially, moved desks and my new desk had a phone with a call display. Apparently call display phones were allowed for people at a certain pay level. Your pay level also governed the height of your cubicle walls. My manager's solution was to promote me. Another former job, we were mandated to work on an engineering-related project outside of work hours, because a responsible engineer always gives back to the engineering community. I could live with that. However, your project had to be related to the company's business. We have to do all of our paperwork at least 3 times. There is a copy of it in our personal folders, a copy online, and a copy in our store folders. Not only does it waste time and paper, but forgetting to do one has gotten people fired. They did the other 2 identical pieces of paperwork confirming that yes, they did take out the trash, and yes, they did check the store voicemail, but how dare they forget to do the 3rd piece of identical paperwork. Our weekly visits from corporate revolve around whether or not we've done all this paperwork. It's so redundant. My workplace doesn't let you use the word problems. Instead, we have to say challenges if something is wrong, as a problem is a negative word, and challenges promotes the fact that there is room to fix said problem. But problems have solutions.
I'd love to have a boss tell me my drinking has become a challenge. Former job at a law office. One of the partners sent an email to the entire staff that employees were not allowed to gossip in the building. What was everyone gossiping about, you ask? Oh, said partner was divorcing his wife and sleeping with one of the associate attorneys in the firm. But don't gossip. All the extra toilet paper in the building has to stay in a single closet where it can be overseen by the toilet paper queen. I heard her shrieking the other day when she discovered someone had hoarded 1 spare roll of toilet paper upstairs, so the people who work upstairs wouldn't have to walk down multiple flights of stairs when the toilet paper ran out. It's the cheapest 1-ply toilet paper available on the giant rolls that only fit in the special dispensers. I can't imagine anyone wanting to steal it.
I hope Toilet Paper Queen is actually her title.
She allegedly does other stuff, I'm not sure what exactly. Hear that, kids? If you work real hard and keep your nose clean, you too can maybe one day be your office's toilet paper queen. Godspeed, listeners.
We had a rule like that, so we all pooled $1 and brought our own TP at Costco, double ply. At first, managers were happy that they saved money on TP. Employees were mad that the company should pay for our TP, but it was a very unifying experience. Eventually, managers tried to woo us back to their side when they realized people were sharing pay information and just generally creating a united front. We had a spoon and milk queen who governed all the spoons and milk for my office. She would go around desks and hound people for spoons. People bought their spoons in so they wouldn't have to deal with her.
But she didn't understand that people could bring in stuff from home and was adamant that they must belong to the company, and got angry if you opposed her spoon reclamation mission. She also redesigned our kitchen. In her grand redesign, she left out a cutlery drawer. But we still have triple-height pots and pans drawer, so that's something. Although no cooker or pots and pans, so it's completely empty. Thankfully, she was let go. I used to work for the now long-defunct books, movies, and music store MediaPlay. Just one of the 285 reasons that poorly run businesses ran into the ground was the tardy or attendance policies. If you were literally 0.01 seconds late clocking in, even hours before the store opened, it was a really, really big deal. You'd not only be formally written up, but lectured like a child, oftentimes berated even. If you were tardy 3 times, bye-bye. However, if you no-showed and then called 2 hours later saying you were sick, okay, thank you, feel better. This trained everyone to just take sick days instead of being half a second late to work. I can't tell you how many times you'd see a co-worker screeching into the parking lot before work after fighting traffic from a wreck or whatever, noticing it was 8:01 and then slowly driving off to go home and feign being sick. This was particularly upsetting when it was pull-down stock week, when we needed every hand on deck but had unusually early shifts. My job years ago tried to implement a very strict attendance policy like that, where if you were 1 second late, you would get written up. Till one Saturday, a guy who worked there for like 30 years shows up to work 30 seconds late. They pull him into the office and write him up. He then gets up and tells them that he's going home. Working Saturdays was voluntary, and he basically said, I don't have to be here today, so I'm going home. He was doing them a favor by working that day, but when they wrote him up for being 30 seconds late, he basically fricked them over by just going home. That policy didn't last too much longer. For the most part, if you're a few minutes late, it's no big deal at all. If you're late all the time, they'll have a word with you or write you up. But they understand crap happens sometimes that's out of your control to cause you to be late. Yeah, screwing over company veterans is historically a bad move in business. Glad that guy had the balls to leave and the rule was cancelled. Many years ago, I was a vacuum cleaner salesman. There were songs about this particular brand of vacuum cleaner and how awesome it was. Every morning, we had to sing these songs as a group. In fairness, it was a pretty quality item. It was Kirby. Didn't mean to be subversive, I just didn't think anyone would care. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him best as I could. Apparently, he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew, in fact he'd been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. If we want to take a full 5 days off week, we need to use 2 vacation days. 1 personal and 2 more vacation days. We can never use 3 vacation days straight. Something similar here. We can't use our sick time until we use 3 vacation days. So let's say I have no vacation hours, but get really sick. I can't use paid time off. Our sick time is essentially useless. We work alternating days, 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. If you take vacation on your short week, which is 3 working days, they dock you 5 vacation days for taking an entire week off.
How is that legal?
I drive valet. The company handbook says you're never allowed to back up. Ever. You absolutely cannot do the job without reverse. It's impossible. It's in there because of liability and our insurance policy. This way, it can always be the valet's fault if an accident ever occurs. Perhaps this will answer the most repeated question: if the rule says no reverse, yet you're expected to park a car, how can you park the car? Answer: never hit anything and always reverse despite the rules. Expect to be fired should you hit anything in reverse, but probably not. The rule only exists to cover the company's butt, but if they don't feel threatened by you working there and you're an asset, you will still not be fired. And yes, many people are questioning the legality of it, and you're right. It wouldn't hold up in courts, but it's in the handbook and it's silly, so I posted it. We can't ask others if they just want to come and grab a coffee in the break room.
Just develop a subtle nod that means the same thing.
How about a slap on the bum and a wink? The last commenter's suggestion for a signal is hilarious, but also feels like a great way to noticeably break a whole bunch of other, much more strictly enforced rules. Not accusing other staff members of being witches. Yeah, it happened, so we had to make a rule. I run a hostel in Uganda. It's not like this anymore, but for a while they attempted to have a dress code. Guys had to wear collared shirts, but Hawaiian-style shirts were totally acceptable. You could not wear jean shorts, but jean overall shorts were okay.
I got sent home one day because my shorts weren't fingertip length. We were tech support. No one ever saw us, that was the best part. Because everyone is asking, fingertip length meant standing with your arms at your sides and your shorts had to be longer than where your fingertips ended. Think grade school rules. I worked as a call receiver. We never saw a customer. We were only on the phones with them. Rule: your hair must be only a natural color. I dyed my hair the exact same color that someone from a different shift had. I was reprimanded. I told them that if the rule was not enforced for everyone, they couldn't single me out. Their reason for letting the other person have that color but not me? Mine was my real hair dyed to an unnatural color. Hers was a weave that could be changed very easily. Really? Then why hasn't she been asked to change her hair? Because that crap is expensive. They gave up trying to convince me they were right. I had a boss who didn't like the outrageous color I had in my hair. I'm a natural redhead. One of my sisters actually got fired for a job for something similar. She's a natural blonde, but kept her hair dyed red for years. When she decided to go back to her natural hair color to cut expenses, professional dye jobs aren't cheap, her boss flipped out and insisted that she go back to red, pointing out that the company had a rule that prohibited dyed hair. He didn't believe her when she pointed out that this was her natural hair color, and fired her for insubordination and violating company policy when she flat out refused to go red again. Actually, she did offer to go red again if the company paid the styling bill. When she went in to pick up her last check a few days later, she took in a handful of pictures of her younger self to prove that blonde really was her natural color. Her boss just looked at them and said, "That just means you've been violating company policy for years, and that I should have fired you a long time ago. Don't bother using us as a reference." She was talking to a lawyer about a possible lawsuit, but I don't think anything ever came of it. I work in retail and we have on-call shifts. Your name will be listed on the schedule for a certain time as a call-in, so you have to call 1 hour before your shift to figure out if they need you to work for the day. For example, you'd be listed as on-call for 2 p.m. and wouldn't know until 1 p.m. if you were working that evening. If you don't call in, it's considered not showing up for a shift, but there's no extra pay for the shift whether they need you or not. So for 3 days of the week, I don't know if I have work or not. Can't make any solid plans to do anything except call my work and ask if they need me. I can't imagine having children or elderly that need taken care of because it would be such a hassle to arrange care for them just an hour before having to work. You people reading this want me to sue this corporate demon. I'm looking into it now and will update with any relevant developments. I'm going to dig up my contracts tomorrow and see if I can speak to a law person. Thanks for motivating me. I don't know if it's a standard, but I worked at a place where HR wasn't allowed to tell us if someone was fired. It was a big enough place that you might not immediately realize someone had left, and when you'd found out, you weren't supposed to ask why. So if you wanted to know if they were fired, you'd ask, "Was there cake?" Which was to say that if the person had retired or left pleasantly after a number of years, they'd be given a party with cake. If they were fired, not so much. For example, "I haven't seen Brian for some time. Brian no longer works here. Was there cake?" We have a lock on the first aid kits, so if you need a band-aid for a cut, you have to get the key from the safety guy, which in turn makes it a reportable accident, with mountains of paperwork and investigations. We use an unbelievable amount of duct tape now. Frick that, I'd be keeping a box of band-aids in a rarely used drawer or hidden away somewhere. There was an issue where there was too much socializing going on the factory floor, particularly when people were working while sitting down. False, skewed supervisor perception. So they made everyone stand. When that presented ergonomics problems, they brought in these weird chairs that made you sit at a slant, had no backs and no wheels, so they wouldn't cause distractions. No part of it made any sense. I feel it. At my old job as a pet bather at a pet chain, we had a stool in the salon to sit at while using the computer, and I had a personal step stool for sitting while brushing large dogs on the floor. The cashiers next door complained that they weren't able to sit, yet we were, so all stools were ordered out of the salon. I thus had to kneel, squat, or sit on the floor to brush every dog over 75 pounds. You try convincing a Labrador that the short table that goes up into the air is safe for a dog his size. What red flags about a company have you encountered while interviewing for a job? Number of contractors to employees ratio. Also specific keywords such as unlimited potential income or this is not a scam. Unlimited potential income, this, especially when it comes with the really only limiting factor in how you earn is you. Cue cheesy crap-eating grin. I recently had to work on some scripts involving recruitment techniques for life insurance agency development heads. And after processing all of it and learning some of the crap they use to try and cajole you into buying insurance or recruit you, I've concluded that they're terrible. Primerica by chance? They dealt with life insurance and tried to recruit me by paying $500 to take a class and get my license. I could make $10,000 a month. No. Also, World Financial. I've been dropping friends like flies thanks to those D-bags who trapped them. Any place that requires you to pay for something to come to work for them is a red flag. Extremely high turnover, or you're being interviewed by people who have worked in their department for less than 1 year. But the thing is, those places will hire anyone, and that's the upshot. You just have to tough it out for a year so you can get that oh-so-necessary criteria of minimum 1 year's experience that every other freaking employer wants for their entry-level positions. Yeah, related, I quit a very good job after 5 years because they brought in a new manager who was intolerable. My replacement lasted 3 days before quitting. Over the next year, that position turned over 4 more times, all because no one could stand this manager. Some of the new employees quit after a week or 2. The company finally wised up and realized that the manager was the problem. These are all pretty good red flags so far, but I'll add a few I've encountered. It took me a long time into my career to trust my instincts on these red flags. 1. When you're going to be reporting to more than one person or department. 2. Super condescending attitudes on behalf of the interviewer. 3. I work in IT, and I had a manager ask me once what I would do if I knew that restarting the system was not going to fix the problem and might make it worse. But he would tell me to restart it anyway or find a new job. I told him, if it's going to make things worse, I'm not going to restart the system regardless of what you tell me to do. I ended up getting the job, but that question actually turned out to be a huge red flag. He tried to pull crap like that all the time. 4. If I can't stand someone's personality in a short interview, I'm not going to be able to stand working for them. Awesome list. I recently experienced number 2 where the interviewer was telling me how budgets work at my current position at a place she only knows in passing. Not only was she very wrong, but I'm the budget person in my department, so I know exactly how wrong she is. This came up when she was annoyed that I didn't fill out my salary requirements on the job app for a position with 0 salary information posted. She said they needed that information from me because they have a limited budget, unlike where I currently work. Spoiler alert, my department's broke and my salary's paid on soft money. We're the exact opposite of rolling in the dough. She followed this up with, "And we don't want to break any hearts," which was almost about as obnoxious as refusing to give me any kind of hint about their budgeted range for the position. So it was all about me trying to be psychic and guess a number that she felt was appropriate, while also being a number that I felt was appropriate. In the end, they didn't offer me the job, and I'm glad, since the interviews, 2, both 15 minutes or more late on their end, I've heard that woman's name come up from someone who currently works at that place. Surprise, surprise, no one has anything good to say about her. Bullet dodged. Interviewer. How well do you handle conflict, such as if you work with someone who might yell a lot? Me? Well, I don't think anyone should yell at someone while working. Interviewer. Your direct report has a history of being passionate about his work. Oftentimes he raises his voice and it might make people uncomfortable. Red flag, run! My last boss specifically ended the interview, which he did himself, by saying that he was a gigantic butthole and that people hate to work for him, and would I be able to work under a boss like him? I eagerly agreed in a way that still sickens me to this day. And I paid for it because he was a man of his word. In fact, if anything, he was subtle and subdued in that interview. He was downplaying what a massive C-word he was. Frick you, Gene. Okay, I've had some unpleasant bosses in my past. Maybe I would have saved a lot of time if some of them had told me up front that they were just absolute buttholes. Last interview I went to, they told me they were going to be bigger than Facebook. The company had 6 Facebook likes and a web page smothered with errors, and got angry at me when I suggested some easy 1-minute steps to fix them. It was for a tech company. You could have just finished with, "We're going to be bigger than Facebook." Did they tell you that they couldn't meet your salary requirements, but would make up for it with stock options? They always seem to have a terrible vesting schedule as well, to the point that you know the company won't be in business long enough to actually vest your options, which I'm sure is not an accident. So, how's the work-life balance here? Followed by laughter from them. This question triggered a big green flag from my current employer. They said that they were really flexible with scheduling, and I could make my own hours as long as they occurred between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., and that I would receive a few weeks' notice if my hours were going to ramp up for any reason. Really one of the biggest reasons I'm still here.
My current job is like that. I asked about the start time and they were like, most people start at 9 a.m., but as long as you get your time in, we don't really care when you're here. The vacation policy for salaried employees is something like, write the days that you'll be gone on a big calendar so we know when not to bug you. Granted, they expect about 55 hours a week, but coming from a job where I was written up for coming in 30 minutes early so I could leave 30 minutes early, never mind being on call 24/7, it's very much a perk.
The biggest danger, screaming red warning flag was when I asked about work-life balance and specifically, what's the day-to-day look like? Apparently all the devs started at 11 or 12 and they were there until 8 to 9, indicating zero families, home lives, girlfriends, or anything else important in their lives that isn't working that kind of schedule. I ended the interview as quick as I could after that. Sure beats 7 to 9. The guys interviewing me took me out to dinner, then went back to the office for a few more hours. One of them had a newborn at home. Right after I graduated, I interviewed for an entry-level data entry or admin position. They offered to hire me if I paid them $750 to complete their training course. Ugh. Oh boy, I've got a list. The interviewer had me stand against the wall while he rated me on my wardrobe. Father-son operation. The two interviewed me, argued a bit over stuff in front of me. Employee manual of one company, I don't know why they gave it to me at the interview, but they did. When the employee is no longer useful to the employee and company must part ways. Italian firm getting started in the US, the interviewer actually excused himself to go fondle the secretary. Googling the firm netted a few links to OSHA violations and deaths. Facebook page of one employee talking about his life on an oil derrick in the Gulf of Mexico. Travel percentage kept changing wildly in the interview. Panel interview, a few folks got up halfway through. Very vague questions about qualifications, mostly about me. Generic skills test and then a DISC assessment. This is a 110% job. You'll also be expected to work at least 2 weekends a month.
I'm encountering a series of red flags right now. So far I've had 5 rounds, yes, 5, of interviews for a mid-level managerial job. All but one of which were rescheduled by the company at the last minute due to conflicts with the various interviewers. I finally reached the final round with a senior executive a couple of days ago, only to have that person show up in an annoyed huff and announce that they had only just now received my resume. They then went on to say, and I quote, "I don't even know why they're considering you for this role." They then followed up with this gem, "Which of our offices is this for again?" Needless to say, after all that rigmarole, I plan on turning down the offer if they send one. We work hard and play hard. Bullcrap. You just work hard and have awkward social get-togethers at most once a month. This isn't Wall Street. All that's going to happen is that you're going to make me work 60 hours a week because of this mentality. I work at a supermarket where we work long shifts and then once a year we have a Christmas do so loud and out of hand that we've been banned from several pubs and clubs. Actually telling me about any obligatory playing corporate activities. Guys, I came here to work. I already have a family to spend my life with. I'm not going to substitute my life for you. You may be a part of my life, don't try to grab the whole life.
I work for the Air Force. They love to have mandatory fun times. Everyone hates it. Want us to have fun? Give us the afternoon to spend with our families. I already spend more time with my coworkers than the people I love.
Interview at a landscaping company. I commented on how nice all the plants were and what a relaxing environment the office must be. The interviewer laughed nervously and said, "It's not really." Then I met the boss and was talking about how I work well with my past managers, and he said, "And what if your manager is a difficult person who yells a lot?" He was referring to himself and I knew it, but I was desperate and needed the job. Luckily, I left after 3 months. I had a boss describe himself as sometimes acting a little bipolar. Not to mention his wife worked for him, so they would have screaming matches from their offices and be really passive-aggressive. So glad not to be there anymore. Anyone who asks you how you handle someone who's bipolar or yell a lot is a huge freaking red flag. Oh god, is there really any worse combination than being trapped in a toxic workplace and in the middle of a toxic relationship? Glad you got out of that place. During an interview, my future boss mentioned that my predecessors flaked out after a day and 2 weeks, respectively. Turns out they didn't flake, he's just a massive butthole. I lasted 5 months. Went for a marketing executive role, turned up to the office, and it was almost totally bare except for 8 or 9 mismatched chairs. We were called into a side office for an interview. The central heating wasn't working, so the interviewer was wearing gloves and a winter jacket. When he mentioned it was commission-only pay, I walked straight out. Beware the Cobra Group. They are mainly just charity fundraisers who give their jobs outrageously misleading titles, like marketing executive. Also applicable if you live in Scotland is a group called Meraki Rose. Noticed a few of their adverts for similarly titled jobs in marketing and sales, saying you don't need experience or even a degree in a related field. They're basically telling you to do one of those jobs where you stand in the high street and try to sell insurance to passers-by. Again, commission only, and they make you do unpaid work at the start as training. Plus, specific info on them and in the job adverts is very hard to come by, and everything is vague, which is also a big red flag as far as I'm concerned. Being left waiting for half an hour for the interviewer, I picked up my bag and walked out. I once was left for 45 minutes with the receptionist, whom I talked to a bit, and this was in undergrad, and I'd never had a job before, so I was desperate. The interviewer, when I walked out, grabbed my resume from the receptionist, looked at it, and then said, "Okay, we'll call you if you get it." I didn't get it. I originally wondered if this was some kind of weird twist interview where they were just trying to assess how I would interact with the receptionist, but I honestly don't think they're that smart. So then, why the heck call me in for an interview if you've gathered from my resume that you don't want me? I just don't get it. You never know what kind of things companies will do as part of their interview process. It isn't uncommon for interviewers to talk to the receptionist to see how you've behaved. Be nice to the receptionist. If the receptionist says you acted like a prick, you'll almost never get hired. I can't remember who it was, perhaps Henry Ford or George Westinghouse, but I recall reading about how this famous business leader used to interview potential executives. As part of the interview, they'd go to lunch. If the candidate salted his food without tasting it first, he wouldn't be hired. The reasoning is that since he didn't taste the food first, he didn't know if it needed extra salt. He was dismissed as unthinking. The moral of the story is, once again, that some employers use unusual tests on job applicants. Be on your best behavior. I once caused a red flag for a person being interviewed. I worked at an IT help desk for a retail chain, and the people who called in could get pretty abusive on the phone. A new guy was being interviewed for the help desk team in a cubicle next to me, and I was on with a particularly nasty caller. So I turned up the volume loud enough so he could hear her cussing me out the whole time. I didn't overhear the whole interview, but I knew he declined their offer. Of course, from his end, this was a huge red flag. He's watching me do the job he'll soon be doing and getting cussed and treated horribly the whole time. It was my way of saying, get out while you can. I saw one of those ads that said work for students, $15 an hour or something. I called the number and set up an interview. Should have known not to interview for a job you don't have to apply for. I got there and it was this crappy building downtown with flickering fluorescent lights. They brought me to a room, not unlike a doctor's waiting room, where several other people sat filling out papers. I was skeptical but needed a job, so I started filling out my paperwork. When I flipped the page over, I finally saw the name of the company I was applying to, Vector Marketing. I only knew about them because a friend of mine sold Cutco knives for a while. I crumpled up the paper and left without a word. I went in for an interview with Vector once, and it was absolutely hilarious. First off, the bullcrap started before I even walked in the door. I told them on the phone that I wasn't interested in a sales position, but would be down to interview for an office job. When I got there, they said that there weren't any office jobs, but I could interview for sales. They just lied to get me in the door. At this point, I wasn't going to take a job even if I got it. I just wanted to stay and watch the crap show. Now, as I walk in, and even more so as I went through the process, I realize exactly what kind of company this place is. As you walk in the door, you see a very nice reception area, and then look behind it and it's this big bare room with a bunch of chairs and a projector screen. As they sign me in and everything, I realize why this place looks only half built. They only built or decorated exactly as much as they needed. See, the entire building is designed with the flow of their con in mind. You walk in and are stopped at reception, which looks nice and legit. An attractive girl hands you an application and directs you down the hall to the waiting area. Once your turn comes, you're led into the interview office, which had part or all of one wall missing, not gone, just never built. After the interview, if you chose to continue and they chose to let you, you're escorted to what I only assume was the indoctrination zone. I left after the interview, so I don't know exactly. This was a large, entirely unfinished portion of the building. No decorations or anything, just a projector and chairs. This was the most insulting part, as it made it clear that their intentions were for everything to seem professional and on the up and up until we accepted a position, at which point they no longer cared about our opinion of their facilities. But yeah, they literally just built just enough walls to facilitate their scheme, no more, no less. They literally don't even bother trying to hide how little effort they put into it. You can even see that final warehousey room from the reception area, as they couldn't even put up enough walls to hide it. Another amusing thing was the interview. They were clearly using psychological tactics to bully kids into agreeing to work for them. For instance, the interviewer was extremely tall, and the desk and chair were huge, while the chair they gave me was short and uncomfortable. If I'd been the same height as the interviewer, I would still have been at least a foot below him sitting like that. In my memory, it's almost like King Yemma's desk from Dragon Ball Z. It was clear that they set it up so that the interviewer would be extremely imposing, and became even more clear when I started asking questions and the interviewer was originally very annoyed and pushy. They definitely set it up so that the interviewer could bully poor kids into joining, as that was definitely what they were trying with me. Not surprisingly, the interviewer became a nervous wreck once he realized I wasn't going to fold anytime soon. Well, initially you'll be a contractor, but there's opportunities for full-time employment in the future. My job involves managing an unemployment database. The amount this happens, especially for students, is astounding. Unpaid internship, 25 hours a week on a 6-month contract. Possibility of employment in the future. It's utterly disgusting how companies attempt to, and do, get away with working students the equivalent of a part-time job or more for free, and lie to them that they might actually hire them in the future. Students need to stand up against unpaid internships and refuse to take them, nationwide. Yep, I'm sad to say that I've fallen for a few of those ads and applied for a few of those kinds of jobs when I was a student. Oh well, you live and learn. Question: what kind of workload can I expect on the average week? I've heard horror stories of 80-hour weeks at big companies. Answer: let's not beat around the bush. All companies expect a 50 to 60-hour week. They don't say they do, but they do. Get right out of there. I'm very happy at my current job that doesn't even require me to answer emails outside of the 40 hours I work. I would gladly work 50 hours a week as long as I was A, paid time and a half for it, and B, given a schedule that actually gets followed. I think in any interview you want to ask questions about the company when it comes time for you to ask questions. 1. You want to specifically ask about the culture. Maybe ask the interviewer what they think about the culture. 2. Ask what kind of turnaround the company has. Low turnover probably means a good environment. 3. Ask the interviewer what they like most about working at the company. Pay attention to their body language and their answer. They're probably not going to be honest if they hate it, but you might be able to tell. If they tell you that they don't like it, that's a huge red flag. When I was first looking into an office IT position, I was in an interview when someone knocked on the office door, asked a question, and left. After he left, the interviewer told me, "That's the person we're going to fire when you get this job." Gave me a bad vibe, so I turned down the offer when I got it. Joke of an offer too, $21K a year. I was making $40K a year working in retail. Things I've encountered. Bad-mouthing other applicants. Not by name, but still not cool. Didn't even look at your resume before they offered you an interview. Then mentioning they didn't even look at your resume before offering you an interview. Offered you an interview, again, before they even looked at your resume, for a position you don't have experience or skills in. The good old gem, the pay sucks and the hours are long, but the work is great. Bad-mouthing other facilities or businesses in the same field. Group interviews where you're expected to give your answer in front of 8 or 9 other candidates. I've probably encountered other red flags, but these were the ones which stuck out the most for me. A thing called knowledge fishing. I interviewed for a building company in the UK for a marketing executive. They wanted to branch into residential builds from a large commercial network, but the marketing manager said they had no idea how to go about it at that stage. Well, I went through the interview process and did my best, then I got a message from them about a week later that I was through to the next stage. However, they wanted me to give them a full presentation of what I think their whole marketing strategy should be for every area, including social media and online marketing, and they wanted a full hour on each part. They ended the letter by saying, "Don't worry, we have a marketing plan. We just want to see if your thoughts are similar to ours." Ding ding ding, bigger red flag than at the end of the first act of Les Miserables. It's worth reiterating that this was a marketing executive, not a marketing director or anything huge like that. I told them I wasn't interested and left it at that. It was pretty obvious they wanted my input to make their marketing proposal, rather than to offer an actual job, especially as their letter stated something completely different to what the manager had told me. I know that this was a knowledge fishing job too, as I was talking to another agency about this and they told me that they've barred this company from working with them for doing exactly this before. In conclusion, company wanted me to do a huge presentation to them. Turned out they were fishing for ideas to implement without having an actual job to offer. Pre-interview, but if a company's website is tailored towards recruiting new employees way more than it is towards clients, it's a bad sign. A real reputable company that is making money wants their website to be client-facing first, and have a tab or link somewhere for careers for those who are interested. If 50% or more of the main landing page is catered towards selling you on why they're such a good career choice, it's either A, a scam, or B, a meat grinder business where the turnover is extremely high, or C, a company that has no idea what it's doing. What's the most cruel thing you've ever done? In high school, one of my teachers had rented a pager and numbers were on a Dymo strip along the side. Being high schoolers, we thought it would be funny to page it all the time with silly things like 8008135, spell it out, and 69. Finally, at the end of the week, the teacher looked at the pager and was clearly upset and said, "Man, someone keeps paging me nonsense, and my wife is pregnant and due any time, and we only got this so she could page me when she goes into labor so I can go get her." Oops, we stopped after that.
That teacher played you guys. He knew you'd feel guilty and stopped messing with his pager so that he could free it up to run his pimping business on the side.
Most people I remember from high school would have taken this as an opportunity to page him, "Baby is coming now," or similar.
This was when pagers only allowed you to enter in a phone number to display on the pager.
When I was young, I had an argument with a friend, so I insulted him because his parents were dead. I went home, realized what I'd done, and cried my little eyes out. He came over as I was crying and comforted me. Still don't have words for that.
You insulted him and he comforted you? That's a true friend right there.
It was worth killing his parents after all. Done to myself, but my sister scratched my face and it didn't leave a mark. I really wanted to get her in trouble, so I ended up scratching myself really hard as evidence, and my mum still didn't believe me. So now I just have a little scar on my cheek from all those years ago. I got a hold of my high school nemesis' email and phone number, so anytime a survey, subscription, or anything that spams you came up, I signed that B word right up. I'm out of high school now, but I don't think I'll ever stop. Fricking hate that kid. I also used to take the pencil sharpener from where it was and use it literally inches from his face until he threw a little fit. Dude, there's a website where you can send Mormons to yours or other people's house. Of course, I would never encourage anyone to do something so cruel, but it is there.
One of my friends did that to me. They showed up and I was confused for a second, then realized what must have happened and felt terrible explaining to them someone was pranking me. They laughed and said it happened all the time and they were used to it. Then they gave me a free copy of the Book of Mormon and left. Mormons are really nice people from what I've seen of them, but Jesus frick was that book weirder than the strangest sci-fi. I really don't understand how grown adults believe in that crap. I'm looking at pictures of Jesus preaching to the freaking Aztecs, and people actually believe that crap. Blows my mind. As people who listen to my videos are used to, we got a little off topic here, but my lord is it funny to know that you can send out for a Mormon prank squad in this day and age. I was in 5th grade. We were on a field trip and I wrote on a wall, "Scott's mum is a working girl." Then Scott went, "Dude, my mum is dead."
Then I changed it to, "Scott's mum was a working girl."
That's terrible. But it's also pretty funny, unfortunately.
As a child, I remember my mother taking my sister and I through McDonald's drive-thru and ordering each of us a burger and fries. We were fairly poor back then, but Mum splurged and let us each have the treat. When we got to the window, my sister and I started whining about it not being a Happy Meal and not getting the toy. In the grand scheme of things, it's not necessarily cruel, as a child is thoughtlessly cruel to their parents all the time. But as an adult, I die on the inside when I realize how humiliated my mother must have been to not being able to afford the Happy Meals, and some nice teenager in the window gave the boxes and toys to her anyway. I apologized to her a few months ago for being such an ungrateful brat, and bless the woman, she doesn't even remember, and here I've been cringing off and on for the last 2 decades over it.
I cringe when I think of all the thoughtless, ungrateful things I said or did to my parents when I was a kid. I'd like to think that neither of my folks remember any of it, or that they wouldn't have held it against me and put it down to kids being kids. I miss my mum and dad.
Drove my college girlfriend to an on-campus party in her car. I had the keys. Found out at the party that she was cheating on me with a guy that was a friend at the party. Told her to get the frick out. As she walked down the street, I pounded a beer in the front yard. Realized I still had her car and dorm keys. Said, "Hey, B-word, you forgot your keys," and threw them at her. She was maybe 30 yards away under a streetlight. Keys hit her in the back of the head and she dropped like a sack. I instantly felt terrible and still do 25 years later. Her dropping like a rock under the streetlight without even making a sound is still stuck in my head. Even though she cheated, that was uncalled for. We're all good now. All is forgiven. I'm chronically ill. When I was younger, we didn't know what was wrong with me. Weekday mornings were awful because I was in an exorbitant amount of pain, and more often than not, I could not go to school. I would relay this to my mum, who would insist nothing was wrong with me and that I needed to get up and go. This was shortly after moving to the other end of the state and starting middle school, so I became extremely depressed. One day, while sobbing, I told my mum she was the reason I didn't want to live anymore. Of course, it wasn't her fault, and that's not really what I meant. I was just a kid in too much pain. Years ago, my then wife, who I was desperately in love with, cheated on me. I caught her blowing a friend of mine. We had a 7-month-old son at the time. I was devastated. For financial reasons, I couldn't leave, so we continued to live in the same house, and I was rocking the couch. 2 weeks or so later, she comes to me with a positive pregnancy test. Frick. Whose is it? No idea, still don't know almost 9 years later. I decide that maybe I can get past this. We went to marital counseling a couple of times, but after the 3rd visit, the therapist was amazing, she doesn't want to go anymore. She's secretive but insists that she wants to make it work, and like an idiot, I trust her. Few weeks later, I see some messages on her phone, and she's still talking to the crapbag friend of mine. I decide, frick this, and tell her I want a divorce. Crapbag friend also tells her to F off. Now she's devastated and realizes she's facing being a single mother of 2 at 24 years old. She panics and really starts trying to put in work to save our marriage. It's too late. I'm ice cold. Frick this B-word. I moved in with a buddy of mine and come by every day to see my son after work, but no conversation with his mother. Months go by and the little guy is born. I accept him as mine. I've got custody of both now, incredible kids, and the X figures this will get me back. I'm still filled with intense rage for what she did to me. I start talking to her more, friendly and often. She gets comfortable with me and we message each other often. She tells me she still loves me all the time. I tell her we can maybe discuss starting something again. She starts wearing her wedding ring again, telling her family and friends we're going to reconcile. Few weeks go by and this rather trashy female friend I had, friend with benefits at the time, comes over and we're going to do the nasty. I get a text from the ex saying she wants to see me and as a sitter for the kids, so I tell her to come over and leave the door open. The trashy female friend knows what's up and is totally okay with it. Ex arrives about 30 minutes later to walk in on this girl riding me on the couch. I make full eye contact and I can actually see her heart breaking into a million pieces right in my doorway. She leaves and that was that. It was freaking cruel and I regret it. Pro tip for the readers at home, being as bad or worse than someone who hurts you never makes you feel better. Told my identical twin sister that I see her as nothing more than a person who I happen to look like. She's obsessed with having a sisterly relationship with me and I can't even find myself telling her I love her. Just putting that down in this text box is weird for me. This is super interesting to me. I'm an identical twin myself, and I'll be honest, our relationship has always been rocky. We spend as long as 8 months not talking to each other over stupid crap. Luckily, now that we live almost 30 minutes away, we've never been closer. I've also noticed that with a lot of twins, their relationship is either inseparable or rocky. Why do you feel the way you do with your sis? Also an identical twin, and my brother and I used to say the most horrible, hurtful things to each other. We had a rocky relationship, me being addicted to substances and him more or less watching me die. When he started smoking green herb after my addiction wasn't controlling me, it got better. We became closer than ever, and then he up and fricking moved to China. He's literally halfway across the world right now, and we talk more than we ever have. When I was in preschool, I had to go pee and this other kid was in front of me, so I punched him in the nose. He left the bathroom with a bloody nose and I went to pee. Got back to the classroom with the teacher furious at me and I had to sit in the naughty chair for an hour. Are you the reason I was afraid of public restrooms until I was 10? Oh boy, my man here just followed the desire of everyone who's ever been stuck in the queue for the toilets at a nightclub. And instead of childish selfishness, we have childish selfishness brought on by alcohol, so I'm sure it's happened on nights out too. My grandma has been fighting cancer for 6 years. First, it started in her chest, but she had them removed. Then it spread to her bones and skull. Right now, she's living with my uncle, aunt, and their children, but none of them seem to really care about her. Now, she's always been able to do things for herself, but for the past couple of weeks, it's been really hard for her. No one told us, and when we came to visit, she only weighed 88 pounds and was looking really bad. She told us no one had come into her room for a week and she'd eaten not a thing. So my mum told me that I was staying to take care of her. I absolutely didn't want to because this family is absolutely horrible to each other and I didn't want to deal with their bratty kids or their incessant gossiping and psychotic ways. So last night I was packing my things and my grandma kept looking at me and saying, "I'm so happy you're staying." as a sort of desperate plea. I loaded my suitcase into the car, and then she gave me the most defeated look I've ever seen and choked out, "But if you leave, Grandma will cry," and just started weeping. I've never seen her cry. She's such a strong woman and never once complained about the chemo, radiation, surgeries, or anything. So now I'm staying. It must suck dealing with crappy family, especially while battling a physically exhausting and excruciating disease. Be the light in each other's lives. Frick the bullcrap, that's temporary. Unfortunately, so is the time with your grandma. When you look back, you won't remember some butthole kid or the gossip-guzzling mother. You'll remember your time with your grandma and how you were there for her when her other crap bags weren't. When I was in high school, my parents were in the middle of a nasty divorce and I was stuck in the crossfire. I didn't know whose side I should have been on and was angry at both of my parents. Being a teenager going through puberty certainly didn't help either. My dad got a promotion at work and I had to move cities with him and left everything I knew behind. Friends, school, etc. This made me despise my dad even more than I already did at the time, and I would go out of my way to be a butthole to show him how much I hated living with him. One morning, as we were getting ready to leave the house, my dad went to give me a hug and I pushed right past him with my shoulder. I remember in perfect detail the look on his face of shock and confusion. Makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about it. That was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I realize now as I'm older how hurt he must have felt in that moment. He busted his butt working 80+ hours a week and made sure I had everything I ever needed and wanted nothing more than for me to be happy with him, and that's how I repaid him, by being a butthole. My dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack a few months after that when I was 16, and I never got to tell him how much I appreciated everything he did for me. Hindsight is 20/20. Sounds cliche, but really, spend time with your parents. Understand that everyone is human and makes mistakes. No one is perfect. Look for solutions to problems in your relationship, instead of pointing out what's wrong. Next time you see your dad, give him a hug. I'm sure he understood underneath the pain. I'll go and hug my dad after reading this. I met a girl in an AOL chat room. We lived in the same town and she insisted that we meet. She wouldn't show me a picture of herself, but insisted that she was hot. I was leery of meeting her, but after talking on the phone, she seemed cool, so I agreed to pick her up, and we were going to go hang out. I was new to the town and I figured it couldn't hurt to at least make some new friends. Well, I pick her up and she was far from attractive. I was okay with that though because like I said, I was new and needed to make friends. A few minutes after I pick her up, she said, "Well, I have $75 and we can go to a hotel room." I was way not interested in that and said, "No, let's go to a movie." She kept insisting about getting a hotel and all the things she wanted to do to me. It was really overbearing. Eventually, I'd had enough. I pulled into a gas station and told her I was thirsty. I gave her a $10 bill and asked her if she would grab me a Sprite. She happily jumped out of the car to get it. As soon as she stepped inside, I peeled out of there and went home. Actually went and played a game of tennis, leaving her at the gas station. I want to add that we were a good 25 to 30 minutes from her house when I dropped her off. I was living in a desert climate at the time and it was a good 112 degrees out that day. Stabbed a kid in the thigh with a ballpoint pen in 7th grade math class because he told me to stop interrupting him. I stabbed someone with a pencil in high school. I don't even remember why. Neither does he actually, but we became friends and anytime we disagreed on anything, he'd go, "You stabbed me!" Let it go, Joel. You were fine. In elementary school, there was this kid, I'll call him Bob, who I just couldn't stand. When we were in 3rd grade, things escalated and we got in a couple of fights. The first time he poked me in the eye, I don't believe he intended to though, and I had to wear an eye patch for 1 or 2 weeks. Later that year, I decided I'd had enough of him and grabbed his backpack, threw it on the ground and stomped it. Our parents got in touch and decided an apology was due, and so his mother brought him over to us. While our mothers were talking, we started playing. We probably got bored. We're best friends for almost 10 years now. When I was in my teens, I started talking with this girl on MySpace. I don't even remember how we became friends on there, because she lived in a completely different state, but it probably had to do with the fact that we were both going through this emo/punk phase. We'd talk every day and even got comfortable enough to exchange phone numbers and started talking on the phone. Then we started throwing around the word love. I was a dumb teenager and thought that I did have feelings for her, but really I didn't know her that well and was more infatuated with the idea of being star-crossed lovers or whatever, and it was nice having someone to talk to. We would always say how great it would be if we didn't live so far away from each other. One day she tells me she's coming to Chicago. At first I'm excited and we plan to meet up, but then on the day of I get second thoughts. I'd barely known this girl for like a month or so, and here she was, hundreds of miles from her home, coming to see me. It became much too real for me, and I was freaked out. So I stood her up. She called my phone and left voicemails and text messages, but I never returned them. I ignored her until I knew she was back home. I then said sorry to her in a message on MySpace and started distancing myself from her. I still feel terrible about it. We were just two lonely kids and she went out of her way to see me, and I broke her heart. Back in college, I used to own an 11-foot-long, 40-pound albino Burmese python, Butters. I owned a fair bunch of reptiles around that time, but Butters was by far the biggest and gnarliest. Super tame, gorgeous, and ate fairly large rabbits once every other month-ish. The thing is, when you have a snake this size, part of the way you keep them being tame is by feeding them pre-killed food. The thrill of a snake taking down its prey can be an allure for some, and my 5 to 6 foot boas did that with rats, but not for the big boy. I took the responsible route and opted for pre-killed dinner to keep him staying sweet. The most humane and budget-friendly way to accomplish this was to use a rigid pole, in this case a honey stick, and place over the rabbit's neck, making sure to only get the neck under the stick. I would stand on it while simultaneously lifting the body up and away with a turn to snap the neck. Several pops, a few seconds of feet struggle, then just gone. Short of constructing a DIY CO2 euthanasia chamber, that's about all I had to work with. It did the trick and the rabbits suffered only very shortly. Arguably a much quicker death than being bitten and crushed to death by a giant reptile. First couple of ones were pretty rough for me. I broke down and cried a bit. Ultimately, I accepted my fate. I decided to care for this animal, so I'll do what needs to be done to give it proper care. I had a wonderful several years with Butters and my others before ultimately downsizing the stash. Found a wonderful home for Butters with a rescue shelter. They were thrilled about the massive living enclosure that came along with my donating him. So yeah, used to own a huge python, it ate rabbits, I had to snap the necks of the rabbits for the snake. Pre-killed food is ideal for huge snakes. I once hijacked a tricycle from a girl in pre-kindergarten. Had to assert my dominance.
Were you in pre-K at the time, or was it like the girl was pre-K and you were 34?
Oh, he meant today. He wrote this post while pedaling like the wind. I really hope that the original poster meant that he hijacked the trike when he was a small child, but then again, the alternative is just so gosh darn funny. I beat a man until he was blind in his left eye. Not a day goes by where I don't feel regret about it.
Does this have a story, or do you just go around beating up left eyes?
The dude was stealing from my truck and was whacked out on some substance. He seemed like a threat, but I pushed it way too far like a piece of crap. I still feel terrible about this one. This happened a lot when I was like 6 to 8 years old and my little brother was like 3 to 5. Whenever I did something bad and my parents found out about it, they would lock my brother and me in a room until one of us confessed. Usually the punishment would be a spanking. Since I hated being spanked, I would tell my brother that I would pay him a dime to say he did it. He, being so young that a dime seemed like a lot, would usually agree after little convincing. While he was being spanked in my parents' room, I would sneak into his room and break open his piggy bank — it was a Barney piggy bank that wasn't too hard for him to open — and would steal out like 50 cents plus a dime. After he would come back from getting spanked, I would give him his own dime back while keeping the 50 cents, and he would gleefully run to his Barney bank to make his deposit. My friend, let's call him A, and I were walking down the hall in school. Walking roughly 5 feet in front of us was this annoying freshman who was wearing a shirt that said "Cash" with a K on the back. So I asked my friend,
"Why does his shirt have cash with a K?"
The answer was, "That's just how his name is spelled."
"And why did he shave his whole head?"
"I think he had cancer."
"Is that cancer with a K?"
This is some relentless crap I should not have laughed at. Oh, for me, it's a tie between my top two. In high school, my homeroom teacher was this old Vietnam War vet who had severe PTSD. Being a lifelong military brat, you'd think I'd be sympathetic, but a wake and bake kind of impaired my judgment. I pulled the little firework out of a Christmas cracker. I lived in the UK at the time and brought it to class for no particular reason. In class, I got the guy sitting next to me to set off the little popper in an attempt to freak him out, hoping for a funny reaction. Instead, he just got really silent for the rest of the period and just stared into the distance the whole time. And number two, before I met my wife, I was set up on a blind date with a friend of a coworker. I met the girl and we talked. She wasn't really my type physically. I did my best to inform her of this gently, then proceeded to ask her if she had any friends that were my type that she could set me up with. She did, and that's how I met my wife. Strangled a boy in middle school because some of my friends said that he was talking crap behind my back. It was messed up because he started to vomit when I let him go, and he was crying real bad. I felt really bad that night and couldn't sleep. I apologized the next day and told him to strangle me to make amends, but he declined. I felt like I owed him something, so I let him borrow my PS1 for the weekend. We became good friends after that.
Now it's the only way he can get hard. You're a monster.
On a Friday night in high school, we had 50 cents left. Our parents were about to pick us up at the end of a night downtown, arcade and stuff. What could we do? We went through the phone book and grabbed an absolutely random person. We ordered them 2 pizzas with extra large, only anchovies, no cheese, to be delivered at 10 p.m. So that was 25 cents. With the last quarter, we ordered the same person 2 dozen roses with a note saying, "Sorry for the pizza," to be delivered at 10:15 p.m. What's your in-laws from hell story? Husband took his own life. In-laws took me to court over insurance money. Most insurance policies don't pay out in the event of someone taking their own life. However, SGLI through the military will pay out in almost all circumstances. I'm doing well these days and I haven't heard from them in a few years. There was a lot of harassment before it actually made it in front of a judge. Forged signatures on beneficiary update forms that were magically found after his death and hadn't ever been filed. It was thrown out pretty quickly, but not before lots of headaches and money down the drain to a thankfully great attorney. Obviously, they were crazy before this, but it really was the cherry on top. His dad was obsessed with trying to catch us doing the deed, going so far as having his own key cut for our house. He had our keys one day when he was waiting in for a workman for us. He would just barge in at any time, never knocked on doors, tried to often barge into the bathroom when it was being used, also liked me to catch him pleasuring himself, would wait until he knew we were a few minutes away. We often called them to let them know we were nearly there, and then he'd whip it out and go to town and looked me dead in the eye when I caught him. Creepiest man alive. We changed to the locks and reduced contacts. When partner and I split, he called me several times to offer a shoulder to cry on. No, thank you. The in-laws have been going through a rough time financially for a while, and my wife and I have been paying their credit card and parent loan for a couple of years. Father-in-law's parents passed this year, and he gets a large but not massive inheritance, around $75,000. We keep paying the bills because father-in-law is still not working full-time and he puts the inheritance away, so mother-in-law, who is horribly irresponsible with the money, can't access it. We just arrived on Christmas Eve and there's a Lexus sitting in the garage, paid for in cash, and now father-in-law is talking about how he wants a Cadillac. I'm so teed off that I haven't been able to sleep, and I don't want to frick up the holidays, so I'm biting my tongue until we leave, but there is no way we're paying the bills anymore.
$5 says they'll react with, "But we need it! How can you be so selfish?" Don't cave. Remember how much that car cost. Remember they were saying in front of you, payer of their fricking bills, that they want a Cadillac.
There's an important saying that one should never ascribe to malice what can be explained by stupidity, and I think that probably applies here. Hopefully they saw reason and accepted the solution with grace. My mother wore all black to our wedding, complete with a black hat with a hanging black mesh to cover her face like she was in mourning.
This made me laugh. So melodramatic. Does she always act like this?
I'm low-key in love with passive-aggressive antics from family. My entire extended family is so melodramatic, I'm running out of popcorn. After driving almost 11 hours with husband to see in-laws, mother-in-law accused me of
keeping her son away from her,
and how I'm
not ever gonna let her see her son again,
to my face and started crying in front of multiple adults and children. The next day, when I asked to speak with her to let her know that what she did was a little unreasonable and very hurtful to me, she showed her true colors and went from crying victim to screaming viciously at me and trying to hit me. She screamed me and husband, her son, out of the house and threw the gifts we had bought her out of the door like pieces of trash. I cannot believe this is the woman who gave birth to my husband. She's like she's from another species.
She sounds slightly mentally unstable.
She just sounds very manipulative, playing the victim for the audience and getting mad when she realizes she's not getting what she wants. My mother-in-law said we could have the wedding at the place she works, for free, otherwise the venue would cost upwards of $7,000 just to rent out. She decided that gave her free license to plan everything to her specifications, including the date, what we would eat, the flowers, what we would drink, and even what music I'd have at my wedding. She invited more people to the wedding than me and my husband combined. To top it off, she refused to watch my husband's son on our wedding night, saying that he would feel rejected if he wasn't allowed to stay with us. Each thing happened by itself, and it wasn't until they all added up that I realized my wedding had been hijacked under the guise of,
"That's how it needs to be if you're going to have it at my place of work,"
which was bullcrap. She just wanted to control everything. My husband called her out on it later, and she's reduced her meddling to almost zero now. Thank goodness.
This happened to me exactly. She always used to ask, I'm divorced now, why we didn't have wedding photos displayed. Because I hated being reminded of that day never seemed like a very nice response.
My soon-to-be mother-in-law devoted an inordinate amount of time petitioning the state to allow her son to be remanded into her custody for a day to attend my wedding. He was in jail awaiting trial for fighting a cop and nurse after getting picked up for drunk and disorderly. He was denied bail because he was currently on probation from previous alcohol-fueled shenanigans, theft and assault, and was looking at a nickel once he finally got a court date. She wouldn't listen to my wife and I when we asked her to stop, so we had to write our own letter to the Department of Corrections letting them know we would have an open bar at the reception and it would be a really bad idea if my brother-in-law was in attendance. We showed him pictures and videos 4 years later when he got out, the first time. Fun fact, my brother-in-law is the reason I'm on first-name basis with the local sheriffs in his hometown, as for the first 3 years I dated his sister, there wasn't a family function that he, the brother-in-law, attended where they didn't get called out. Out of curiosity, how's the brother-in-law doing now? Today he's walking around on parole as a convicted felon, carrying the balance of a 20-year sentence over his head, and someone is waiting for him to break parole. The problem is that he's definitely got a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. When he's sober, he's one of the kindest, most generous, and most noble human beings you'll ever meet. But as soon as he starts drinking, it's all downhill from there. One of the first times I ever met him, he literally, as in took it off and handed it to me, gave me the shirt off his back so that I could make a good impression on their grandparents. He then proceeded to get so drunk that emergency services had to be called, which set the tone for the next 15 years of our brother's by-marriage relationship. I care deeply for the guy and do what I can to help him and his kids, but he doesn't have my home address for a reason. To answer the original question, he's getting his next 30-day chip next week, and we're all really proud of him. Again, I personally am hoping he sticks with it this time. This isn't as out there as some of the overtly rude in-laws, but mine were so utterly self-absorbed, insular, and lacking in social skills that I was literally ignored throughout most of my early encounters with them. They had a family culture which they all buy into, in which my father-in-law is the center of everything. The only family pictures in the house were of him, none of the 3 kids, all food was prepared to his tastes, and he had no concept of other people's needs or feelings. Initially, I felt utterly rejected and disapproved of, because who goes to dinner again and again with people and is never asked one question, not even, "How are you?" It took me a long time to realize that they just had no idea how to interact with other people because they lived in this complete bubble. To this day, my father-in-law treats every conversation as an opportunity to change the topic to himself, no matter how outside of his experience it is. But I realize that they never cared enough about me to bother to disapprove of me. That being said, my father-in-law's levels of narcissism are so great that he sees slights and digs at him in a lot of my Facebook posts and unfriends me because he couldn't bear the idea that I wasn't considering his feelings with every thought I shared, as he's so accustomed to everyone catering to his needs all the time. I'm sure I was supposed to be wounded to have no longer been in his good graces, but I just laughed. I think he is genuinely and cluelessly taken aback when he's not considered the most important and greatest person in the room. My mother-in-law refers to all of her daughters-in-law as son's first wife. She gave me used stationery for Christmas. Want more? She wore a white dress to my brother-in-law's wedding rehearsal dinner and interrupted, then stopped the best man's toast so that the soup wouldn't get cold. She told me that I'm a horrible mother for not sending my kids outside to play unsupervised all summer, like she did in the 70s where mums would kick the kids out, lock the doors, and tell kids not to come home until dinner. I nearly died after having my first child, and she told me that God was telling me I'm not fit to be a mum of more kids. After we had our second, she told me that I had my hands full and had no business having a third. After my third child, she told me I had too many children for anyone to ever want to babysit. By the way, she has 3 kids. I keep a very clean house, but I have 3 young boys. They're messy. Before brother-in-law and sister-in-law came to visit one time, she sent a cleaning crew ahead to clean my house so that it would be up to their standards. He's the golden child. Father-in-law lives with us 6 months a year while he collects butterflies for his book. He pays no rent and runs up our utility bills with no thought about it. When we ask him to clean up after himself, he says he didn't realize he'd made such a mess, but thought it was my job as an at-home mum to clean up after the men. He's not invited back for 2016. When she comes to our house to see the kids, I regularly tell her not to get involved in our laundry. She always ignores me, goes through our closets, rifles through our stuff, and then makes comments about what she finds. To be clear, my husband always stands up to her. I was the one who constantly tried to repair their relationship. I finally gave that up last year. We're now essentially no contact with them, and they are not allowed in our house. To talk to the kids on the phone without us supervising, and phone calls are only on holidays. And now, after reading this, the narrator has decided to thoroughly stalk and vet individuals before any deepening of relationship going forward. Who would want a monster like this in their life? Where do I start? My mother-in-law and my grandmother-in-law are both weird about food. A few years ago, Grandma left a turkey to defrost on the counter for 4 days. My sister-in-law came over, almost fell down due to the smell. Grandma said the turkey needed to be at room temperature for the enzymes to develop. My sister-in-law had to bag it, toss it, and scrub down the kitchen to make it fit for humans again. My mother-in-law had a big dinner one year. Rather than use paper plates, she used real ones. She had about 50 people or so. We didn't go, but about a week later or so we were over. There was lots of snow on the ground and my dogs were out in the yard. One of them kept going over to a snowdrift and digging and digging. We went to see what was up. The plates were all buried in the snow. Rather than run them a bunch at a time through the dishwasher, she left them outside and they were covered by snow. So, service for 50 people, filthy, left outside for a week. No wonder my dog wouldn't leave that snowdrift alone. Nothing says loving like week-old roast beef stuck to a plate in the snowdrift. Last one for now, Grandma was supposed to get a bottle of pickled peppers yesterday, as part of her Christmas gift. In the general chaos of kids and everything, the bottle, still wrapped, broke. It was all mopped up and tossed. We told her, sorry, we'll get you another one. Her response, why did you throw it away? We told her it was broken and the glass was all over the food. She told us we could have washed off the peppers and still eaten them. We told her, no, you'd die, and she refused to believe that. And this is why I never, ever, ever, ever eat anything these people cook. Not ever, not at all. So much to tell, but I'll just say that every once in a while, me and my wife have had to deal with a wellness check from the police because her parents call and tell the police they haven't heard from their daughter in weeks, even though they talked to her the other day. And they also say I'm one of those people who would chop my wife into pieces. Luckily, my step-uncle is a lieutenant in the sheriff's office, and the last time they got a call from the chief telling them to stop. I state I wanted to host Thanksgiving, and I invite all the family. Mother-in-law then invites everyone to her house and not us. Found out when I started calling sisters to firm up plans the week before. Also, the only family member not invited to a niece's baby shower. So done caring after 36 years of being the last invited or not being invited at all. Of course, we always get invited to the work parties. Okay, so my mother-in-law at the time of the story was about 350 pounds. She chain-smoked these terrible all-black cigarettes that were longer and thinner than normal cigarettes, and smelled like death, and she would only wear polyester muumuus that she bought in the 70s. Her voice sounded exactly like Roz from Monsters, Inc., and the only things she would talk about were how hard it was to find a new muumuu, or how her channeling was going, and what the various spirits had to say. The first time I met my mother-in-law, she sat me down and started talking to me about the energies that spoke to her from the Pleiades. As she was telling me about how they were going to fix the world, I realized that to her the Pleiades was one place, a bunch of space lights that were all very close to each other, because they're close together from our point of view. When I, in my naivete, tried to explain to her that the stars that make up the constellation are in fact an enormous distance apart, and some of them don't exist anymore, she just scowled at me, shook her head and said, "No," and kept talking. Later that night, my wife and I were awoken by a huge commotion and we found her drunkenly destroying the kitchen. When we asked her what she was doing, she said, "The energies need a burrito." So we made her a burrito and sent her to bed. In conclusion, my mother-in-law is an insane, drunken chain smoker who only wears polyester muumuus and channels the spirits of the aliens who live in the Pleiades, who want a burrito. At my wedding, after the ceremony, our new mother-in-law started yelling at my husband because he made a joke to his father. She then proceeded to storm off, dragging his sisters with her. After about 5 minutes, her F-buddy of the week stomped over and just started going off on my husband for being disrespectful. I was almost certain my reception was going to turn into a brawl. 3 years later, she still hasn't apologized. Oh, where can I start? Gave my 7-month-old a scale for her first Christmas so she wouldn't get fat like me. Told my husband that he wasn't allowed to get a vasectomy because he might want kids with his next wife. Told me I was gross and that she didn't know why her son would want to come home to me. The night our daughter was born, she berated my husband for giving our daughter the ugliest name she had ever heard. My grandmother's name and his grandmother's name. Told my mother my name was ridiculous and ugly. This year she cancelled Thanksgiving and Christmas to try and teach us some weird lesson. It was fabulous. I could honestly go on, but she is just a bitter old lady. Called me by the ex-wife's name for a couple of years, and it wasn't as if hubby's first marriage even lasted a year. During visits, if I admired anything in her home, I was told, "You can't have it." I wasn't allowed to do chores to help out. She even took my husband's pants out of my hands when I was doing laundry and pre-treated them with Tilex. Ruined them, but I was to blame for rushing her. If I brought presents for her, I was extravagant. If I did not, I was cheap. If I asked about the family, I was a busybody. If I didn't know the details, I was uncaring. My cooking was all wrong, i.e. healthier than hot brown, overcooked, fatty, salt-laden mystery foods. My best Christmas present from her was an acrylic angel with the wrong birthstone from the dollar clearance bin. She kept giving me angel stuff, and I'm not even remotely religious. If I made suggestions, I was greedy and critical. We now live far away and no time or money to go visit. Sorry. My in-laws weren't terribly interested in me until I got pregnant. Suddenly, they were all about being in my business. They flooded us with unwanted advice and terrifying stories. I stopped giving my sons formula at 3 months because it was too expensive and they're fine. Or when told that the hospital checks our car seat before release, I remember bringing our oldest home from the hospital in my lap and he's fine. Mind you, I'm the same age as their oldest, car seats existed and people like them are probably the reason the hospitals check now. Anyway, this escalated to invading personal space, which included talking to and kissing my belly, even before I had a bump. No matter how many times we told them not to do it, my mother-in-law would swoop in like a ninja when I least expected it. Come wintertime, I had a good-sized baby bump and a maternity coat to cover it. We were leaving the in-laws' house and I already had my coat zipped up, smugly thinking I'd found a way to defend myself. Much to my horror, she starts pawing at the bottom of my jacket and attempts to yank it up. When that doesn't work, she bends over and tries to kiss below the coat, completely misses the bump, and plants one right on the front of my pelvis. I'm frozen, going, "Your mother just kissed my VV," over and over. My husband says, "What the frick, ma?" She just shrugs, says she doesn't care, and walks away. 0 fricks given. Later, my husband negotiated that she just blows kisses from that point forward. Otherwise, I refused to see them. In conclusion, my mother-in-law tried to kiss my baby bump and instead planted one on my hoo-ha. I will note that I've tried to spread out the various charges against different kinds of in-laws, but upwards of 90% of these stories have been mothers-in-law. They just seem to be the most likely kind of crazy to get up in their children's spouse's business, I suppose. Cousins-in-law came to Thanksgiving the day after we buried my grandmother. They ignore her husband of 58 years who's sitting at the table, don't offer any condolences to any family members, and complain when we dedicate the goats to grandma, and not their 4th child with the 3rd husband. Also called me ignorant for not knowing who the American Idol winner was this year. The only saving grace here is that my wife knows how crazy her mum is and has gone no contact with her. Here are some things that happened in no particular order. The big one, father-in-law, who's a pretty good guy, has MS and is basically bedridden. Mother-in-law has been consistently misdosing him on his medication, including giving him sedatives that she's gotten from somewhere. Her adult daughter and her husband moved in to help renovate the house to something that's more handicap accessible for my father-in-law. They spent nearly $20,000 in renovations, remodel and redecoration, along with new appliances for the kitchen. Without warning, my mother-in-law served them with an eviction notice, giving them 3 days to vacate. They live about 2 hours away. In the past 10 years, she's made 2 trips to actually see my daughter. There have been 3 or 4 more trips for things like going to garage sales, where she's made an hour or so visit as part of the trip. For my first Christmas with the extended family, she forgot to buy me a gift, so she went to the freezer and got me a summer sausage that had been in there for nearly 4 years. Nothing says welcome to the family like a ruined, frozen, smoked meat. For another Christmas, I got a giant bottle of Listerine and some toothbrushes. Mother-in-law works at the dentist office and liberated these gifts for me. She saved a ham in the refrigerator to make ham and potato soup. The ham had been in the fridge, not the freezer, for nearly 3 months, and she was still going to use it for the soup. Mother-in-law is making tons of money in land royalties from fracking. Sister-in-law recently saw a royalty check from the oil company and it was over $900,000. Yet mother-in-law won't spend any of that money to refurbish the house or pay someone to provide the kind of care that my father-in-law needs. She's all kinds of fricked up. Not technically my mother-in-law yet, but told me her daughter wasn't ready for a ring after we'd already picked it out and she was asking me when she was going to get it. A few months later, she was contemplating a cross-country move and said to my face if she left, there was no one here that her daughter would stay for. First words to her daughter when she told her of our pregnancy were, "How could you be so stupid? My fiancé is 30, we're doing well, live in the same place, and are due in August. Cut the cord with the mother-in-law." To clarify a bit, my husband was 12 to 16 and watched her alcoholic dad beat her mum. Her mum would in turn get in bed with her or sleep in her room to ride it out for the night. At 18, they divorced, and she went 5 years and received her master's. Came home and has been living with mum since. There is a bond, albeit unhealthy, that neither wants to break. Her mum is lonely, clinically depressed, and suffers from severe anxiety disorder. I've given her every option to slowly get away, which she seems to have no intention of doing. Our relationship is suffering, and I'm not really sure where it's heading. What I do know is that no matter the outcome, I will be the best father to my child that I can be. Actually building the baby's crib today. My in-laws came from a very, very rich family. They're rich enough to take a helicopter ride to another city in order to avoid traffic congestion. This one year, they told us to wait for them before starting dinner because they would like to join us. They promised to arrive at 7 p.m. They finally arrived at 9:15 p.m. 15 minutes later, they left, sister-in-law saying she wasn't feeling well and would like to return to their hotel to rest. We waited more than 2 hours for a 15-minute appearance act. Everyone was teed off. Oh boy, my time to shine. This will be a series of short stories. A little background. First, I'm Mexican-American and my wife is white. Also, her parents are divorced. 1. After she met me, her mother took my then-girlfriend into the kitchen and said she was dating below her. 2. After he first met me, my father was asked by his family what I was like. He only said, "He's a wetback." 3. Since I have now graduated from college, law school, passed the bar exam, and become a practicing attorney, my mother-in-law constantly belittles my wife. Most recently, during dinner, she stated that my wife has lowered her prestige in light of my accomplishments despite my race. 4. When my mother-in-law and her husband visited us for the first time after we got married, we found them in our bedroom uninvited and they were searching for something on our bed. We finally heard their hushed tones and realized they were looking for stains on the sheets. 5. The mother-in-law wanted us to all go to a small town in Alabama to see her family for Thanksgiving. So we went, me a little anxious about what to expect. It was a very awkward experience. I think I might have been the first Mexican they'd ever seen, and then we had Thanksgiving dinner. A relative started describing this program the city initiated, where people can provide aluminium cans in lieu of payment for bus fare. Mother-in-law's husband says, "Beer cans too? Y'all are going to be seeing a ton of Mexicans on the buses." Everyone fell on the floor laughing. My wife and I could only stare at each other in disbelief. 6. This Thanksgiving, mother-in-law and husband invited their contractor to dinner. He's from Colombia and has no family here, so I thought they were being friendly. When he arrived, husband kept trying to get us to speak Spanish to each other because us, being Spanish speakers, we would basically be family. When introducing him, mother-in-law said, "He's from Colombia, but we don't call him a terrorist," and started laughing. What was something you thought was grossly exaggerated until it happened to you? General anesthesia. 3, 2, 1, and suddenly I'm being moved to the recovery room. I always thought it was kinda cool how a 6-hour surgery can feel like 2 seconds when under anesthesia. The only time I was old enough to remember going under general anesthesia was to get my wisdom teeth out a few years ago. I was freaking out and one nurse had to console me as I was getting the substances put in my system. I started to feel it and it made everything feel better, kinda like the initial effect of morphine, and I remember doing a little dance on the chair and going, "Yeah, let's get this party started." And then it was 2 hours later and it was over. I always thought I could fight it. You cannot fight it. This was the scariest thing. I'd always imagined it would be like being asleep or being passed out, where you wouldn't feel anything or even be aware of sensory stimulation, but you would at least have some sense that time was passing. Nope, it's like a light switch. Off, on. Kidney stones. They're for real. I was out of the country and on an excursion, if you will. Actually, when I felt something weird about 3 inches up and to the right of my belly button. I didn't have back pains until later. When I got back into town, the pain had gotten a little worse and I thought nothing of it. The next day I woke up and it was more sharp pain, so I went to the local hospital and they did a sonogram to check me out. Spleen, appendix, and whatever else they checked for came back fine. They gave me some Vicodin and sent me on my way. I took these daily and was okay, but every once in a while I took a jolt which nearly brought me to my knees, but then went away. Fast forward to coming home. Was on the plane back and started having sharp pains again. Went to the restroom and peed what looked like cranberry juice. Had a small panic attack and went back to my seat and took the Vicodin. Still had 6 hours of flight time left. Was freaking out the whole way home. Back in the States, I went straight to the hospital and they couldn't figure it out. Told them about the sono and no kidney infection. I could see the concerned look on my doctor's face. So they did a CT scan. A couple of hours later, my doctor calls, "I have good news. It's only kidney stones." My initial reaction was, frick, if that's good news, what did you think was wrong with me? Anyway, the report came back TMC, too many to count. I had hundreds all over my kidney, but had a 9mm one stuck in my ureter. That night it moved and I was laying on the bathroom floor throwing up and couldn't move because of the pain. I thought I was dying, worst pain I could physically ever be in. My father had to come pick me up off the floor and take me to the hospital in the back of his Tahoe. They performed a lithotripsy, which isn't a walk in the park either. I went home that afternoon after passing 3 stones and who knows how many blood clots from the procedure. Since then, I've passed 2 more that were small but still painful. I've not yet had these up to this point in my life, and I live in eternal fear. Let's see how we go. Getting older. Aches, pains, less energy, more responsibilities. Never thought it would happen to me. In a similar vein, how much time speeds up as you get older. I'm 40 in a few months. This year it felt like it went January, February, April, December.
Oh god, you're telling me. Seriously, where the frick did 2014 go? Also, 2013 for that matter. I feel like it should still be 2012 to be honest.
Sunburns. I'm a brown guy and honestly, I thought my white friends were being dramatic about their sunburns. Then I decided to go fishing for 6 hours without any sunscreen. Oh yeah, sunburns suck.
Dude, one time I got so sunburned I couldn't wear clothes for 3 days. I had to ask friends to bring food to my place because I couldn't go outside without clothes. When I woke up, the creases of the sheets would be imprinted onto my dry skin for hours. The very touch of air hurt my skin. It was one of the most painful experiences in my life. I developed a whole galaxy of freckles on my shoulders overnight. I came this close to skin cancer, I swear. I thought people who called in sick or whatever when they threw out their backs were sissies. Then I threw out my back. Holy heck, it hurt to do pretty much anything. I threw out my back and had bronchitis at the same time, the only time I truly wanted to die. At the ripe old age of 19, I started throwing my back out 2 to 3 times a year due to a congenital back problem. Thanks, genetics. I still brace myself every time I have to cough or sneeze, whether I'm having a good day or not. There's nothing quite like the hot, stabbing pain that radiates down through your legs and out the bottom of your heels. My dad threw out his trumpeting once. I didn't know whether to laugh or feel bad for him. Insomnia. Not being able to sleep is fricking maddening. When I was younger, I thought there was no way this could actually be a serious problem. I was wrong. Welcome to my world. What is even worse is if your significant other totally sleeps fine. Ugh. Watching someone else sleep like a little lamb while you're exhausted and still awake is infuriating.
That was me every time I had a sleepover. Like, how the frick did you fall asleep in 5 minutes? Then I'm awake for another hour or two just thinking about how much I want to strangle everyone who can fall asleep in under 2 hours. Black ice. I had a suspicion it was mostly something people blamed for careless driving. Then I finally ran into some. Didn't crash or anything, but honestly thought my brakes failed until I parked, stepped out of the car, and nearly fell from the slipperiness. Black ice is some scary crap. Last year, some poor woman launched her car off an overpass after hitting black ice. I pass under this bridge on my daily commute, and it's about a 50-foot drop. She actually walked away from the crash, so she was okay, but my gosh, can you imagine? I would have been dead anyway from the heart attack. On a related note, snow tires. I moved from Arizona to Montana in December. I'm not a very smart person. My dad told me to buy snow tires before departing, but I couldn't find any in Arizona, oddly enough, and concluded my all seasons would be fine. I read a bunch of tutorials about driving on ice before taking off, and I got really good at pumping my brakes about halfway through Utah. Finally, in Idaho, I gave up and decided to try snow tires. I thought it would be a waste of money and wouldn't make a difference. I was wrong. As soon as the snow tires were on, I suddenly had full control of my car again. In conclusion, my dad was right. I always thought hearing adults talk about their nieces and nephews like they were such a huge part of their lives was stupid. I barely know any of my aunts or uncles or cousins or whatever, so it always seems like they were just playing the niece card to make it seem like they have more responsibilities than they really do. Now, I still don't have any nieces or nephews, but my mum married a guy with a pregnant ex-wife when I was 15. And I tell you, that kid is my girl. I've changed my entire lifestyle, my opinions, and how I treat others and the future because of the responsibility I feel towards being there for her and setting a good example. I love her to death. I want to be a role model and live my life in a way that she can be proud of one day. I never realized what it felt like to watch a little baby grow up into a brilliant kid, or how important a child can be in your life even if they're not yours. And she's not even my blood. I get it now. Falling in love. Lemony Snicket sums it up perfectly. One of the remarkable things about love is that despite very irritating people writing poems and songs about how pleasant it really is quite pleasant. The day some sappy love song comes on and you're like, yeah, I get what they're talking about. How painful a badly cramping muscle is. I didn't buy it, then I had one when swimming one day, and I actually thought I was going to drown.
My wake-up call one morning was a double hamstring plus a calf cramp. I don't know the odds of that happening, but my gosh, it was terrible. Eat a frickin' banana. All y'all motherfrickers need potassium. Vertigo. Oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. It really is. The first time I got it, it completely blindsided me. First thing in the morning, I opened my eyes and the horizon became vertical, which would have been amazing if I didn't feel like crap a millisecond later. Becoming dizzy really doesn't do vertigo justice. I literally watched the world rotate 90 degrees. Then I just had to wait until it stopped. Sleep paralysis. It's like my eyes were awake, but my brain was still asleep. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't breathe. The harder I tried to regain my breath, the harder it was to breathe. I knew it was pitch black in my room, but it was like everything was strobing colors, like dark, very deep colors, and there was a deep ringing in my ears. It only happened to me once, and it was terrifying. Sleep paralysis is the worst. The first time it happened to me, I had no clue what was going on, and I remember thinking I was dead, and I remember trying to scream, but couldn't. And the more I struggled to move or scream, the worse it felt. I've had it happen a few times since then, and since now I know what it is, I honestly just lay there until it passes. My sister was in a car accident over 15 years ago and still freaks out when a car gets too close. I thought it was just her being stupid until I was hit by a drunk driver. Now whenever I'm a passenger, I get really nervous and freak out if someone doesn't look like they're going to stop or like they're going to hit us. A panic attack. The movies show it as an almost humorous exaggeration of the severity, or so I thought, and then it happened to me. I realized those movies were absolutely horrible. Yeah, the panic attacks in the show Ted Lasso are actually about some of the most real depictions of this kind of event that I've seen in media so far. They are harrowing. Also, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, watch Ted Lasso. How hard it really is to just find a job, let alone one that pays for you to have a comfortable life. Wait, it gets worse. You'll soon find out that a lot of the people that have those jobs are lazy, incompetent fricks who for some reason or another are immune from being fired. Especially now that you have to apply online everywhere. I was spending at least 15 hours online a week for months, filling out tedious applications while my savings dwindled. One day my mum says, "If you spend half as much time looking for a job as you did on that computer..." Oh man, I lost my freaking mind. I explained it, but to this day she doesn't get it. Even when I found work, I had 2 jobs where it ended up costing me money to even show up, and I had one where I was just barely breaking even. Not to mention 20 or so interviews of, "We'll call you," and all that fricking bullcrap. Wasting my gas driving all the way wherever, getting all dressed up and doing the "I'll suck whatever you want me to suck" dance. Frick that crap. If I'm ever unemployed again, I'll use my last chunk of cash to hire a hitman to perforate my trachea with a rusty screwdriver. I hate when people who've not had to do a job search or even been in the workforce for 15 years try to give you advice for finding a job. You just want to shake them and yell, "It isn't like that anymore." The whole system is different. The advice you're giving me is outdated and basically worthless. Bad period cramps. For those who don't know, cramps can vary in pain level with age. When I was younger, I thought I just had awesome pain tolerance or that cramps really weren't that bad, as I've had a lot of painful experiences. Broken bones, chronic migraines, tears, sprains, strains, slips, the lot, and been okay. Then it all went to heck. For one day a month, I'm literally in too much pain to stand up straight. I have to stamp my feet on the floor to keep from crying out if I'm for some reason able to get myself vertical and my feet to the floor. If I'm lucky enough to have the day off, I curl up around the toilet and just cry because I'm in so much pain I want to throw up. But since throwing up won't make me feel better, I just lay there hugging Ralph the big white phone for moral support. It's so painful I can't think. It's easily at the same pain level as a bad migraine or throwing my back out, both of which I've experienced. Holy frick, ouch. The kind of depression that makes it physically impossible to pull yourself out of bed in the morning. Putting down a pet. I held my best friend of 13 years' head in my hands as he slowly slipped away from me. It's been weeks and I still can't get past it. I've lost people I'm close to, and it didn't touch how hard this was. He wasn't just a dog, he was a family member. My cuddle buddy who slept in my bed with me every night from the time he was a puppy. I don't want another dog ever again. I just want my boy back. I would give up anything I have or ever will have to have him back. I miss you and I love you, Link. Toxic relationships. I always got mad at my cousin for not leaving a guy who horribly mistreated her, and then got into a similar relationship and it was really hard to get out. People are also unsympathetic to child mistreatment that spills over into adulthood. People always say, "You should have moved out earlier," or even worse, "They're your family, you should forgive them for what happened in the past."
No. It still happens whenever I see them. I won't forgive a life of mistreatment. No one would say anything like that to someone who'd escaped a terrible partner. My mother had complete control over me and had even raised me to think she could read my mind at all times. It sounds stupid now, but when that's all you've ever known, it can be difficult to change the way you think. I never misbehaved as a teen, yet I was always a problem child, and my mother still tells the story of my life in terms of my anger issues and attitude problems. I wasn't allowed to go out even when I was 20. I wasn't allowed to work at all, to the point where I'm now panicking almost nightly about getting a job. I was yelled at, hit, and subtly insulted to the point where I have no confidence in anything I do, even though objectively I know I'm capable of dealing with a lot. I have nightmares most nights about being trapped back at home. I get really jumpy when I travel alone because I was actively taught that women like me get taken advantage of for being stupid enough to go out without other people for protection. It really hurts too when people expect 20 years of horrible treatment to be fixed by 2 years with lower contact with the one who mistreated me. My friends get mad at me for being overly sensitive when they tease me jokingly. I was traumatized with similar techniques. It would just be nice if more people around me understood what it's like. The pain of getting cheated on, consequently realizing you can't trust a person who you've given your heart to. I thought it was so dramatic and a call for attention when I heard other people complain about relationship problems. Little did I realize it was literally like a knife stabbing you in the chest. This. When I found out my ex was cheating on me and got one of the girls, there were multiple girls, pregnant, I literally collapsed on the floor in the middle of my dorm room. I have never and will never bawl again like I did then. I cried every day, multiple times a day. People would say the usual, "Hey, how are you?" and I would lose it. Never have experienced pain like that. My first girlfriend, who I was with for almost 2 years, cheated on me, and that crap cuts you up way worse and in so many more ways than you're led to believe. There's the obvious feeling of betrayal, and then there's everything it does to your confidence, and the fact that you feel like you can never trust anyone ever again. Not just a significant other, but also friends who could have known, and then there's more deep-rooted crap like how emasculating it is, or what people who knew it had happened before you did must have thought about you. And then you're going to start going around in circles feeling like a bad person because all you care about is your place as a man and so on and so forth. My ex actually introduced me to the guy she cheated on me with between the time it happened and the time that I found out. Even the slightest thought of what he must have thought of me at that point makes me want to flip my crap. Never cheat and never be the person that someone cheats on someone with. That crap doesn't just cut you up, it changes you for life. How loud small arms are. I knew intellectually that they were noisy, but unconsciously assumed they were a movie or video game volume. Went to a firing range and shot a variety of them. Even with ear protection, they still feel overpoweringly loud, and it's clear as day you'd damage your hearing if you fired them without taking any safety precautions. Can't look at most movie gunfights the same again. Also, I had earplugs in and those gun range earmuffs over the top. Also, how hard it is to hit anything, especially with a smaller weapon like a gat. You think you're properly aiming down the sights, then you fire, there's a big flash and it kicks back in your hand, and you look at the target and realize you were way off. And that's taking your time in a controlled environment. I couldn't imagine trying to be accurate under pressure while trying to hit a small moving target, not without a crapload of training. Yep, being at an indoor range is one of the most disorienting experiences a man or woman can subject themselves to. I'm pretty sure that even with the proper protection, all regular patrons must need hearing aids later in life. Just Texas. Alright, I'm being a smart aleck, but I'm also being very truthful. I've lived in a number of different places because I was a military brat and a vagabond, and I've encountered a hell of a number of different people. As an adult, moving to Texas surprised me. I thought I'd find it had been exaggerated, but the appetites, the personalities, the pride, all of it are bigger in Texas. They fricking love their state. The pain you feel when, and after, eating a ghost pepper. I thought people on YouTube were just exaggerating to get views. I have an Indian flatmate who cooks with those. She must be immune because the other day I came in after work and suddenly it was like I'd walked into a cloud of napalm. I was on my knees coughing and crying and she just looked down from the pan and rolled her eyes. It's not that bad. I thought I was going to die. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. I remember as a kid watching one of those MTV True Life documentaries about people with OCD and thinking about how ridiculous it was. I mean, why can't these people just not wash their hands 50 times a day? Why can't they just lock the door once and be done with it? A few years later, when I was around 16, I started to develop some strange habits. For instance, if I heard even just 1 second of any song on my iPod, I would have to listen to the rest of the song in its entirety, down to the last second. So if said song ended and I didn't get my iPod paused before the next song started, I would have to listen to that song in its entirety. These were the first signs of horrible things to come. Over the next 5 years or so, my OCD manifested into almost every facet of my life in different ways. The compulsions would get more and more complex to the point where I would spend hours trying to fix it. Life was miserable and every day was a challenge. I could go on all day about the different compulsions and manifestations, but this is already the longest post I've ever made. I did get better for the most part, it's not ruining my life anymore, and it's pretty dormant most of the time, but every now and then it creeps up and tries to bite me. I've learned to fight it pretty well though. The happiness of a stable, healthy, loving long-term relationship. I wish this were higher up in the list. My significant other and I periodically ask each other, when does it get hard? Because we're both from dysfunctional families. We've both accomplished so much because we support each other in a way I didn't know was possible. The nights we check out of adulthood to make pillow forts and eat ice cream for dinner make me feel like we're in Calvin and Hobbes. I've been told by cynical people, oh, you're still in the honeymoon phase? You'll start having fights soon. Like we're just too dumb to get into fights yet. We've been married 6.5 years exactly today, and we've been living together for more than 9 years. I think if we were going to start fighting, we'd have done it by now. Literally not a single fight in that entire time. Not to me, but to a very close friend, getting taken advantage of on a date. She simply wasn't the same person anymore. She went into a shell and refused to even seek help. It took almost 2 years of convincing her to take her to a therapist, and 3 years after that for her to almost come back to her old self. But even now, she refuses to trust men. Getting a bad, we're talking 2nd or 3rd degree, burn. I've broken 3 bones, gotten a multitude of concussions, had surgery and much more, but when I got 2nd and 3rd degree burns on my chest, nothing compared. The pain is unending and you can't escape it. You know in movies when that scary monster or psycho murderer is coming for a character and they just freeze in their tracks? You start yelling at the screen, "Run away, moron!" Yeah, well, that totally happens if you get scared enough. Your whole body just freezes to the spot even when you desperately want to run. It's horrible. Walking home from the bus in middle school, I had to pass this enormous Rottweiler that lived in a small yard enclosed in a 3-foot fence. Not nearly enough to keep it in. The dog would bark furiously from the moment it saw me until I went out of sight. I was terrified every day. I generally like dogs, but there was no question that this one could maul me. Well, the inevitable happened and it jumped the fence. I tried to scream, tried to run, but couldn't do anything but cry. It was awful. I couldn't attract anyone's attention or help myself. I felt so scared and alone. Like you, I always thought it would be easy to get myself out of danger. It's not. Lucky for me, the Rottweiler wanted to only lick my hands and get a little pat. But man, was I scared. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.